Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024. This is the Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. It's 6:30. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands as a nation under God, liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A Section 20. And on March 29, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. We are wrapping up our warrant article presentations, and then we'll be working on recommendations. So we have one warrant article, the CPC, and we have invited Betty Slade, and she is here with us tonight. So I would like to turn the floor over to you, Betty. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for considering this article, Article 13. This year we have basically four projects. One, and I'll go through each one of them more carefully, but one is to completely rebuild the town bicentennial playground up near the Macumber School. The second one is, then that's $350,000. The second one is Affordable Housing Trust, $300,000. The third is Historic Cemetery website, which is $30,000, and the Bell Schoolhouse rehabilitation as a Westport History Center. We also had to set aside reserves. We have to do 10% of our estimated fund revenues either as reserves or as a project. And we used historic preservation reserves actually to do the history projects, some of them historical preservation projects. Administrative funds is $40,000. That's a maximum of 5% of our estimated revenues. And budgeted reserves are what is left over after you've used all your estimated fund revenues for the next year, either as reserves or as projects. I think you've seen all of this. It's in the article, is that right? Have you seen this? So you know,
yes,
basically.
Yes, it's listed for Article 13. Yes.
So I just actually day before yesterday sent in the final version because there were a couple of typos, FY23 instead of FY25 and so forth. So we had total revenues. We're expecting total revenues of $856,000 this coming year, of which we're using $746,000 for projects. So that leaves us $110 for budget reserves, as I mentioned before. Often people ask what kind of reserves do we have after we've done the projects. And it will be about $855,000 we have in reserves for future years. We usually have more than that, but projects are getting to be much more expensive. The first one is an example, the town bicentennial playground project. That's estimated to cost at $800,000 to put in a new playground. Of course, CPC members reacted very strongly to that, but we were convinced that that's what it's going to cost. We do have $200,000, which we got from private funding, and we will be using CPA funding for the rest of it. It'll be a complete replacement of the existing playground. I don't know if you've seen it up there, and it'll be completely accessible. It'll be completely safe. It'll be up to date and really good play structures. So That's our first project, and that's our only project in open space and recreation. The second is the community housing project, that category of CPA funding. And this year, the Affordable Housing Trust asked us for $40,000 for the Housing Assistance Office. They asked for $200,000 for land acquisition and development. The CPC has encouraged the Affordable Housing Trust to try to build up the funding that they have available in case projects come available, because then they have to move quickly. And they've done a plan for the future, and they are doing that. We're hoping that they will concentrate on larger projects, 30 units or more, and that's what we've been encouraging them to do. Prehab there is existing affordable housing, and the people who are living in those homes, owning those homes, can come back to the Affordable Housing Trust and ask for help if certain things go wrong, like dangerous electrical and plumbing conditions and so forth. So the Affordable Housing Trust has set aside from CPA funds $60,000 to help some of these houses that have these particular problems. The last two projects are in historic preservation. There's been a historic cemetery website, which has been privately developed, managed, custom developed when we first started the cemetery projects. And now it's failing. And the person who set it up said he's not going to spend any more time on it. So the town itself needs to have a cemetery website. They need also to have the cemetery software that is necessary to keep the records accurately. They've been dependent on our private cemetery website. So the CPC felt that this was a good investment for the town, and we've located the possibility of the software for $30,000. The last is the Bell Schoolhouse. As you probably know, last year and previous years, the CPC has invested in, has recommended town meeting support for this incredible project. The Bell Schoolhouse is the center of history in Westport, and the new center, once this is finished, will be excellent. But last year, or the year, we found out that there wasn't enough funding to achieve the kinds of projects that they wanted to do, and they came back to us for $110,000. They've been hit by COVID issues, the costs that have risen because of COVID and labor costs and so forth. You might remember that the private funds for this rehabilitation, the total with private and public will be about $1 million. We have this historical society will do a grant agreement with the town, and they have agreed to put a historical preservation restriction on the outside of the building so that it will always be preserved in that way. So those are our projects. Any questions? Okay.
Yes. Well, I have a quick question for you, Betty. Do you have more projects in queue, or do you have enough funding if more projects came, or are there projects on hold because you don't have funding?
No projects are on hold because we don't have funding. We have nearly $900,000 in reserves available. We are expecting a fairly large, significant open space project next year. There are a couple of others in historical preservation, but there's nothing really in the queue right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions for Betty?
No. Always a nice job, Betty, and always succinct and to the point. So thank you.
Well, you know, we appreciate everything you do, and your committee works really hard and does some fantastic projects. So it's always nice to get a brief overview of them. And
Karen, one of the great things about CPA funding is that it is joint town private funding. I mean, it brings together people, and people come to us from private sector, come to us, and they, for example, the Historical Society or the Handy House or various things like that, and they provide the expertise, actually raise funds, and it brings community together. I think CPA is really good for bringing community together. Besides the kinds of things that it does that people really like. So it's the people who are asking for these projects generally.
I think you got a fun committee.
We have a good committee.
Yeah, that's great.
Karen, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Morton.
Go ahead, Hugh.
I just wanted to add that we know, but the audience may not know, CPC can allocate funds only to certain categories. One of them is open space, one is affordable housing, one is historic preservation. And within those categories, as Betty is saying, there may be a lot of different possibilities, but the funds cannot be used for things like the operating fund or other things that don't fall within the categories.
Correct. Sometimes people get disappointed. There's also some legal restrictions that have come up. We had an issue this year with a church that wanted financing, and town council ruled that it would be illegal to finance that project. It's possible they're trying to find a way around that, but we shall see.
I think that's a good point. Also, Bears, that rule changed a few years ago.
That's right, in
2018. We did some historic preservation with churches. It's not that we changed our mind, it's the rules changed.
Right. The Supreme Court of Massachusetts made a ruling, and now the various CPCs around the state are trying to interpret it and see how far they can go.
I might add also, one of the questions did come up during the course of the year, particularly in reference to the one of the items here on the list. If it's coming from, if the funds are coming from fund revenues that are already reserved and not anticipated, those funds are available as soon as the town meeting is certified. They do not have to wait until July 1st to receive those funds. So as soon as the annual town meeting is certified, those funds become available to the recipient, provided they are coming from reserves and not anticipated fund revenues.
Yes, Cindy, that's why there is this funny allocation that you see for the funding. We know that certain things need to be done immediately and certain things can wait. So we try to allocate it to make it easier for the project applicants.
Right.
Great. Any other questions for Betty? Betty, this was nice and succinct and brief, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. It doesn't come from your budget either.
We've had a lot of long presentations, so I think we'll be happy with a nice 10-minute presentation.
Right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Betty. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, David.
All right. Okay, so we may as well knock this one off the chart, and we may as well, if we're ready to just make a motion on this Article 13, so we can put this one to rest. If anyone would like to
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of Article 13.
And a
Second.
Great,
Second.
thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so as we do this tonight, just as we did on other ones, I'm going to go in the same order for everyone. So once you kind of realize your order, you won't need to wait for me to call on you. You can state your full name and then your recommendation. So here's the order. So Hugh, I'm starting with you.
I recuse myself.
Okay, thank you. So you are, is that an abstain? Is that what we call it?
Yes,
Hugh?
I think that would be abstained, right?
Okay. Gary,
Gary, yes.
thank you. Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
thank you. Al,
Al Lees abstain.
thank you. Abstain. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Cheryl Lando, aye.
thank you. Zachary,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
thank you. Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
thank you. And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. All right, one down. One down, a few to go. Okay, so what I'd like to start with first is our fiscal 25 budget. And I didn't print that one out for me, but we've had this on our queue for quite some time, and not much has changed in the last month or so. There's been no new information that's come from the town administrator that we need to add something that has more recently come to light since the select board recommended their budget. We have not received any newer information from the state in regards to state aid or assessments. So we really, at this point, there's nothing else that's come. So the budget that's been before us is ready to for us to review and then make our recommendation for town meeting. So I think there were a couple of items in there from the last time that we spoke. One was the town engineer. We had questioned that position because that's a new position that the select board was requesting into the budget. We talked to the town administrator about that, and he explained what the purpose of the town engineer is for, but we never circled back. I don't know if anybody has any comments on the town engineer, or if we're fine with the number as it is, or if anybody has any comments on that. We also talked about the animal control officer. I had made recommendation before that when we had talked about it when they were here, that they were really understaffed and they were using overtime to fund whatever they can with the position. And I had asked the chair of the Board of Health and suggested they came up with a proposal of an additional 25,000 would really be of significance to them, that they could then work with that and really help fund a part-time second position as backup. And then the third item that we have is the school budget. So those are, as far as I know, the three things that we need to talk through. If somebody has anything else, feel free to share anything.
Karen, I would only add that in relation to the school budget, additionally, if we have any discussion or debate about the amount of the school budget, we also have to discuss the source of funding for the school budget. So currently it's coming out of a different formula funding versus using free cash. So in that same vein, when we're discussing if we as a group propose to recommend a different amount, we need to adjust or address the source of funding as well.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. And just a few new members. So again, the select board makes its recommendation to the finance committee. The finance committee is independent, so we can accept the budget as it is or make any changes we feel appropriate. So we're not tied to the select board's budget. We're here to determine what we feel is best. And it's the finance committee budget that will be printed in the warrant, and that's what will be recommended at town meeting. And then, of course, at town meeting, anybody on the floor could make any changes or make any motions as well. Go ahead, Michelle.
So we recommend it, but can the select board override that?
No.
So
On town meeting floor.
On town meeting floor.
I'm sorry?
On town meeting floor, anybody can do anything.
Anybody can, but before that, so they gave you, we have the budget that they put together. We do whatever, and then that's the one that goes in to town meeting. And then at that point, people can make changes.
Correct.
Would the select board ever make a change, or an individual representing themselves would make a change, not necessarily as a select board member?
It could be either.
It could be either, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, we all like to be on the same page if we can.
Sure.
So we don't have, the finance committee has a budget and then the select board has a different budget. So if the finance committee were to make changes to their budget, they may go back and they did this last year. I think the finance committee made some changes to the budget they presented to the finance committee. Then we voted on our recommendation. The select board went back and said, that's reasonable. We'll revote and we support the finance committee's budget.
Okay.
So they could do that, or they might not agree with what our recommendations are, and they may on town floor as a group say something or not. They can do whatever they want.
Right, but they would never so after today, let's say we vote on it, we made changes. Would they ever, prior to printing the warrant and before the meeting, say, no, we're not going to go with that? They cannot go with that. Okay.
They cannot.
Gotcha.
This is the finance committee's article.
That's the purpose of all of this.
Yes.
It's the finance. I got you.
Yep,
Okay.
it is the finance committee's article. They cannot force us to change anything. We determine what gets printed in the warrant in that Article 4.
Understood. I wasn't quite sure how the final budget gets put together. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Al, you had a question.
Just a point of information, refreshing my memory. The town engineer, if I remember correctly, was based on the fact that Jim is swamped, and then there's the potential of a Route 6 project, which it just goes on and on and on and on. So my question is that if the Route 6 project does not pass, do we still need an engineer? It's a question. It's not a statement that we don't.
Yeah.
I just
my understanding was the engineer for that project would be practically a full-time engineer and would be paid for by that project. Of course, with the assistance of any town engineer. There are many, many other projects around town. The Hicks Bridge project, the East Beast project, the many sewer and drain systems or the drainage systems throughout the town that require engineering. And many of those projects sit there and wait because we have to wait to get an outside engineer to come in and look at these things. So this is really a helpful tool for the highway department.
And I'm not.
I'm just saying that's how he kind of works into it, that this is really a necessary entity for all involved, for all the departments involved, not just the Route 6 project.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, so the budget appropriates the funds. It doesn't necessarily mean the position would end up getting hired if they so chose to not. So this is appropriating the dollars. So if they choose to hire it, so they could, for whatever reason, change their mind, and they're not obligated to have to hire the position. Just the funds are there in the event they do.
Great. Thank you.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe we could start with the topics we know won't have as much conversation to be had. The animal control office the animal control position, and I think this other position that we just kind of talked about, so we can, you know, be strategic and make sure we spend the time on the big ones.
Yeah, the only three that I'm aware of are of what I mentioned. So those are the only, throughout the last month when we've talked about the budget, those are the items that have surfaced that we didn't talk about. So that's what I got. If anybody else, again, has anything else in the budget that they want to bring forward, we certainly will entertain the discussion, but I don't know of anything else in the budget at this point.
Karen, I just wanted to offer some comments on the engineer. And many years ago, I was on the planning board in a different town. The engineer was involved in lots of things. And I think we can look at an engineer as, to some extent, an assistant to the building inspector too. There are all kinds of things that come up with an engineering note type. And so having that capacity around is not just the idea of Route 6, but lots of things where having an engineering consult available and being valuable.
Well, this wouldn't be a
Go ahead,
oh,
Gary.
sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
This wouldn't be a consultant. This would be a full-time position with benefits, correct?
Yes, it
Yeah.
would be.
They allocated 120,000 in the budget for it. I
So,
believe.
yeah, so the question I have is, how much do we really spend on engineering services in town? I mean, I get that Jim's doing some of that, but how much of his time is dedicated to engineering? Can we maybe spend 50,000 and have somebody certify plans? You talk about Route 6. The Route 6 project is that's a state highway. Why would a town engineer be involved with a state project? Or engineering roads on the state highway?
He wouldn't be. This is really more for many of the other tertiary things that go on in the town. It could be something as simple as a, drainage duct, that needs to be replaced, wasn't put in accurately, on Adamsville Road, whatever. I mean, there's so many other things, as you mentioned, there are lots of things that the engineer would get involved in. So this really has very little to do with Route 6.
Yeah, how much of, I guess we don't know the answer to that. How much time is dedicated to engineering services in town? And can it be contracted out instead of a full-time position with benefits?
Well, they do contract it out currently, and part of the problem is when they need engineering services, since we don't have one on the payroll, part of the problem is they have to wait for someone now who's not familiar with it, who now maybe in 3 weeks can come and look at it, then has to become familiar with whatever the issues are in the town. It takes so much longer to get things done by hiring up, because you're not necessarily always going to get the same person if they're not available. So, I mean, I think it's a position that will be well served. If after a few years they feel that it's not, not good, I mean, they can offer it as a contract service with someone and give them a limited 2 or 3 year contract. I'll leave that up to the select board, but I don't think that this would necessarily mean it's forever.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, it's a $100,000 plus position, which is pretty expensive for the town. The question that I had was, is there any way it can just be a contract and where you're not obligated to a full-time employee, that it's hard to have a full-time employee and then after 2 years to say, we don't need you anymore, as opposed to if it's a contracted position, then you can contract it out and set your term. But
can we hire one new person in this town that has some benefit? I mean, the highway department keeps shrinking. Other departments keep shrinking. Can we at least put some additive value into the budget that will help many departments across the way, and at least provide some benefit somewhere instead of always cutting?
Yeah, no, and I agree. And, just to remind everyone, Jim had, in the select board, had a long list of positions, critical positions that they really needed. And especially Jim, Jim is the the HR admin, he's the
Right.
procurement officer, he's the finance officer, he's a lot of things. And so this position would certainly help him. And this is the position that he felt was the most important thing to help him in the town. So I'm not here to dispute that. So that's for them to determine. So I'd support that. So I support the town engineer.
Yeah.
Q, go ahead.
I gotta say, all these points are perfectly good. I'm just gonna say, we will find out how much we saved in not contracting out, having somebody on board to do things. And no one at this point knows, I think, what the figure is, and it may turn out to be modest, but it may also turn out to be very substantial, because Cindy's point is very good. New guys come in to do a job, they're probably gonna charge for their time in getting up to speed to understand what each job is, and we pay for that. So if we have the in-house, we don't have to pay it, and it offsets the cost, and it's far more efficient to have the guy who knows what's going on. And if we find out that it doesn't really work or save much, etc., then it's not, we plan to let him go, but we have to make decisions in the future.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have a contrary opinion? Does anyone feel that this shouldn't be in the budget?
Aaron, Duncan had his hand up, and it kind of goes up and down.
Oh, I haven't seen it. Okay, there it is. It's up. Go ahead, Duncan.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to question. I mean, on the face of it, it seems like we ought to hire a town engineer. But I look at something like we have a part-time IT director, and he probably puts in 30 hours a week. I mean, is that an option where we can find a consultant that we can retain for 30 hours a week or something like that? So instead of 120, it's 75.
To my understanding, they're willing to accept their ideal view is that they would like to have a full-time position that is under their purview, that would report to, they're still working out the details of how the reporting hierarchy would be, but someone that the Board of Selectmen would be able to, I don't want to use the word control, but would have under their purview to determine what projects are important and how the time would be expended versus each department trying to kind of rally or jimmy their way around getting an engineer to come in and do certain things, or have a part-time person, which may be overwhelmed. So I think they would be happy with anything, with any notion towards having a town engineer, whether it be part-time or full-time. They feel the load is there for full-time. You get part-time, I don't know how many part-time engineers there are out there.
No, I don't either. And again, I tend to support the full-time engineer.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm hearing concern about $120,000 of benefits, and I'm trying to see if there's middle ground or if there's another way to play it.
I think the answer is that we authorize money in the budget. Then it'll be up to those who are doing the hiring and organizing the position to deal with just these questions.
I agree, Hugh. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I guess I would say, at first when I heard the amount and the position, I was kind of leaning to be against it, because it seems a lot with the situation that our budget's in now. But, the more I think about it, it's a job in itself to find someone to fulfill that job within individual projects and individual times of the year. I think that if the position was to be full-time and year-round, or at least have the funding for it, it would be much more likely for the needs of the town to be filled. So I think we got to take into consideration the amount of work it would take just to fulfill. If this was, to say on 125, we save 45, but yet there's still, someone's got to find these people for these individual projects, and that's another burden on Jim. So I'm kind of leaning towards the full-time role here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Zach. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Cindy said earlier, that pardon me, I think we've gotten to a point in this town where we have tried to cheap ourselves down to a point now where I've never seen a business that has ever cut expenses to a point that has ever grown, and the town is a business. So we need to start slowly building the building blocks for the future. And a town engineer seems to make sense to me. I mean, between the schools, the highway department, Ralph, on and on and on. I mean, that person maybe wouldn't even want the job if they saw the job description.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to echo that, and I'll end it there. And I'm in support of it.
All right.
Karen,
Okay,
I'd
so
like
it
to
sounds,
make, go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I was ready to make a motion, but go ahead.
yeah, I don't know that we're going to make a motion on the entire budget, so we can make a motion on the line item, or not.
Okay.
But I think it sounds like there is an opposition, so it sounds to
Okay, so we can leave it.
We can make a motion. I don't think we need to, but
Okay,
we're going to budget on the whole. So it sounds like at least the majority here are
we'll find
do you
out when we vote on the budget.
yeah. I mean, do we want to make a motion on I don't know, on the
include it?
line item?
We
I don't think
can,
there's reason not to clarify things. I think
Okay.
we're genuinely in
Well-
favor, but let's move it out.
Yeah, so
I would make a motion to leave the town engineer as requested in the budget recommended by the select board.
Second,
thank you. And any other discussion before we go to, nope. Okay, so I'm going to go in the same order. Hugh.
Hugh Morton, aye.
All right, Gary, you're up.
Gary, no.
Gary, no. Okay. Christopher.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Al.
Ellie's eye.
Cindy.
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle.
Michelle Orlando, I.
Thank you. Zach.
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan.
Duncan Law, aye.
And Karen, I. All right, so the next item of much smaller is the animal control officer. The recommendation is to add $25,000 from what was originally in the select board's budget. And that is to help, there's one full-time person that manages 24/7. And when they presented to us, there was some pretty significant overtime that was trying to help fill the gap. And the Board of Health came back with a proposal of adding 25,000, and they can add a part-time person. And that's was all sent to you a few weeks ago.
I would move that we include an additional $25,000 in the animal control officer budget for that purpose, for the purpose of it was adding in a part-time person, right? It was
Correct,
for
yeah.
adding a part-time person.
Second,
I'll second. Zach did it.
Yep.
Just going to add that this is one of these things where we're adding money, but we're also, we hope, offsetting additional appropriation for overtime. So it's maybe a maximum cost of what we're allocating, but it may turn out to be a good deal less by offsetting existing.
All you have to do is read Shorelines, the police reported Shorelines, and you look at the time and the dates of most of the animal complaints, and they happen at 2:30 in the morning on Saturday or Sunday morning at 1 a.m. or it's on the off hours of the animal control officers, so that they are dealing with these things quite often in the middle of the night on the weekends. So I'm sure they're putting in some overtime. So having that part-time person working weekends will be much more helpful.
Right. And again, the finance committee is appropriating the funds. We're not hiring a person, so we don't have the authority to do that.
Right.
We're putting the funds there. The Board of Health is still going to have to go in front of the select board and request the position and do all the things they need to do. So they don't automatically get to hire somebody. So they still have to follow. So we're appropriating the dollars so they can have those conversations and figure that out. So we have a motion and a second. Any other conversations before we vote on this one? I see none, so I will do a roll call. Hugh.
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary.
Gary, yes.
Christopher.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al.
Ellie's eye.
Cindy.
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle.
Michelle Orlando, I.
Zachary.
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan.
Duncan Law, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. Okay. So the last one is the school number. Just to recap, Hugh, did you want to go?
No, I was going to just respond after you're through.
Oh, okay, you're ready to respond. Okay.
Comment, that's better.
Oh, sure thing. No, absolutely. Just to give the recap, the select board, we do the normal 54% split of revenue. The select board, through discussions with the finance committee and through discussions of the 5-year plan, talked about reducing the free cash from 500,000 from last year down 100,000 each year for the next 5 years to eventually eliminate free cash from the operating budget. So the select board initially did do that. I'm just recapping for everyone. So the select board did add the 400,000, but then they proceeded to changed the revenue sharing formula and added another $252,000 of additional revenue sharing. So the school right now is getting $652,000 above the normal recurring 54% split that would be there. And so that's where we are at right now. So Hugh, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't like anything about it, but I don't have any better approach. So then I think in my view, we're stuck with it under the circumstances, and we hope we can do something better in another year. But I don't see anything around it. So therefore, I put it this way, I'm not in favor, but I'm not opposed, put it that way. I'll go with it.
Thank you. Cindy, go ahead.
Yes, is there sufficient funds in free cash to substitute the amount of money that would be coming from the split and now put that over to free cash? So this would be yet an increase, another increasing year in free cash, but we have not changed the allocation in the base budget so that in future years, we're still dealing with the same formula and using the additional free cash. Your estimation of what is available in free cash, Karen, would that allow that 252 to come from free cash?
It would. So the suggestion that I made, if everyone felt that we wanted to keep the number at 652, the suggestion that I had would be, we're using free cash to pay off a campground debt. So it's just a flip. So rather than use the free cash to pay the campground, we're using the free cash to fund the school, and we're using the regular revenue sharing to pay off the campground.
Right. Okay.
So the suggestion would be not to do it as revenue sharing, because that's always going to become permanent and forever. So if the committee wanted to do the 652,000, I would suggest it be in the form of all free cash and not revenue sharing. But having said that, I am in disagreement entirely with 652,000 of free cash. So I'll be honest. We had an override attempt. It was not successful. We really need to get this budget in balance, and it needs to get there. And we're moving in the opposite direction. So the school number was it started off at 150,000, went to 300,000 for free cash, went to 500,000 in free cash, and now it's at 652. We're moving in the wrong direction, and we have to start reducing it. We can't continue this, and so I cannot personally support 652,000, whether it's free cash or free cash in revenue. It's not something I can support. Go ahead, Al. Al, you might, oh, there you go. You're muted, Al.
Freezing a little bit.
There you go.
Okay now?
Yeah.
I cannot support the change in the percentage. I think it sets a bad precedent. It gets embedded. I am in total sympathy with you know, the challenges that the school department has, many of these things that are thrown at us, them, and other towns in the state are out of their control. Whether it is special ed, whether it is transportation, whether it is, but there has to be a medium ground. There has to be coming to the middle where we don't just continue to escalate every single year. It's like, you know, death by 1,000 cuts every year. It's a little more and a little more and a little more. And the next thing you know, it's within a year or two, it's going to be $1 million, you know, bogey in this whole thing. I don't know what the number is, but you get my point. So I'm with Karen on this one. I would like to see at least have some, at least getting back to the level playing field of last year. I mean, that would be a step in the right direction, not a continued escalation. So I just can't, I'll leave it at this. I just can't support the formula. It's a bridge too far for me.
Thank you, Al. Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, you know, again, I'm kind of a newbie here, but, you know, I guess I'm a little frustrated. I mean, what is the school department supposed to do with, you know, the real things that are pushing this over, or their budget over is, you know, state mandated, you know, special ed stuff. And so, I mean, you know, we can talk about the split and all that stuff, but what are they supposed to do? I mean, what's their recourse?
Right.
Well, unfortunately, that's an extremely difficult question, right? I mean, we can't answer that, but it's an unfortunate thing for the entire town. It just can't get funded by the revenue that the town has. And so there has to be an adjustments. The town didn't get the override for additional revenue.
And I get that, but I mean, there's no other options, there's no other sources of revenue, grants, something to help the school budget. Yeah, I just I'm in that school 3 days a week as a substitute teacher, and you know, I'd have a hard time explaining to those kids that that's the situation.
Mm-hmm. Gary, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Gary, you're on mute.
You're mute if you're trying to talk.
Now you're okay, Gary.
Oh, okay. So, you know, the most disheartening thing of us whole is the process. You know, we're given an unbalanced budget every single year. It's unbalanced. Using free cash and kicking the can down the road 5 years, that's an unbalanced budget. And shame on the Board of Selectmen for doing this. Every single year they do it. And they leave it up to us to now say, well, we're going to make cuts. Or no, we can't use free cash. This has been unbalanced for years. And we go back and forth. And why do you think an override fails in this town? It's because here we are, the last minute, making adjustments out of free cash. So the public sees this and says, well, it's a Band-Aid approach. And then there's other members that say, well, you know what, we'll deal with it next year. This is a big problem because, as I said a month ago, once we run out of free cash, what are the schools going to do? And we can't just keep saying, well, we'll worry about that 4 years down the road, because that's irresponsible. Not only from this Board of Selectmen, but for us to continue to want to accept that. And in 12 years, this is the first budget I'm not voting on. And I'm not going to vote yes.
In the view of the public, we always manage to make it work. And that's why the override doesn't pass, because it's like, see, they didn't really need the money because there were no cuts really made.
Right. So
I will honestly say right here, I still have never, ever, ever gotten a list from the school department as to what adjustments were made in last year's budget on a line-by-line basis due to lack of funding. Were their teachers cut? Were their teacher aides cut? Were their programs cut? I have no idea. We have asked for it many, many, many times and never received it. We've heard verbal accounts of what has happened, and students come and students go. And I get that. It's a challenging position for them. I totally understand that. But if we keep feeding it, nothing changes. And the public enjoys the school system, which is great, but it comes at a great cost. It comes at a huge cost. And as Gary said, one of these days, the music's going to stop. And boy, is that going to be a big, big problem. Because now you're not going to get $672,000. You're probably going to get even a lot less than that.
There was years in the past where the town certified negative free cash.
Correct.
So what happens in the situation where we don't have that last bucket of money is no longer there? This is not forward thinking. And for us to go out for another override in a year or two, that's embarrassing, in my opinion, because it's not going to pass, because this is what we play the same game over and over and over again. And unfortunately, I became a member, of this committee, not to be, concerned, and not that I say I'm not concerned, but concerned about each department. We have to be concerned about the residents. And I think that's what, as far as I'm concerned, that's the reason why I serve.
Right. And I'm not knocking the school system at all. They have their challenges. They have their mandates. I'm not saying, they're terrible and they don't know how to manage a budget. I understand, but the public sees that we still manage to make do. Why should they pay higher taxes? We make do. We're using the savings account every year. And the
public also sees that we've been asking for extra police, extra fire, and no contribution to those departments. So how do we continue to contribute to one department substantially, and not give that same credit to other departments? Right. People see that. I hear about it all the time. Exactly. And to think that we cannot have blinders anymore. We can't keep saying that in 5 years it's going to get better. It will not. It will not.
Yeah, Gary, I think you just made a case for the override.
Well, we've tried.
We had a case for the override. Nobody wants to approve it.
I watched this happen in the town of Westwood, and the town voted to support the schools, support the library, support, the residents by, increasing home values, increasing, the services that the town provided. And so, we've got a block of voters in this town that is not interested in that. And so, that's the issue. That's the issue in a nutshell. I mean, we can talk all day long about how we squeeze blood out of a rock here and make do, but we're not addressing the issue.
Duncan, increasing land values changes nothing. 2.5% mandates the maximum of the money raised. Nothing to do with valuations. That just changes it around. 2 points. One is I agree with the not change the formula approach, etc. And answering again, I don't pick on you, Duncan, but you say, well, you say to the kids and so forth, we don't have the money. They're supposed to learn that in their families, etc. There's only so much money to go around. It has to be allocated. And when you've allocated all of it, there are no money trees, etc. And that's unfortunate, but it's reality. And everybody's saying we need to do something about reality. So my thought would be A, no change of the formula, and B, try to find out, I think we'd start with Karen may have in mind, what a figure that we would be willing to accept would be.
Right. Thank you, Hugh. Michelle, go ahead. And then I'd love to hear from Christopher and Zach because we haven't heard from you.
Thank you. I totally understand the formula and not wanting to change that. And 652,000 seems a lot of money coming from free cash. And I totally get that. And I guess my thought is from being on the school committee, and first I want to say though, that there were no cuts made. There were programs that didn't happen. There were TAs that were cut. There were also one principal running 2 different schools. So I know
we've never gotten a list, Michelle.
I understand that. I get it. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not you know, I'm just saying that there were cuts done or things that were in the budget that ended up having, not to be funded, as you would say, in the budget because there wasn't enough money. And while I understand there isn't enough money, we all understand that with the rising costs. And I think, so when you have, when you end up this year saying, okay, we're going to have a principal for 2 schools, or we're going to cut TAs, we're going to do that. But that's fine. You don't fund that. You don't have the money. There's no money tree. But what happens when you get these state mandated items, the money has to come from somewhere when it's not there. They don't have that. They don't have the choice to say, well, I'm just not going to hire another TA, or I'm just not going to hire another principal because I have to pay this bed. So I guess I'm just trying, and again, I don't have the answer, but I understand not wanting to change the formula, but we've seen the rising costs throughout the entire budget and all departments. So what is the answer to take all of that into consideration? Because to Gary's point, this doesn't work. We keep, you know, the can just keeps on getting kicked down the road and somebody else will have to deal with that. So what is the answer? And I think the 5-year plan that Karen started at the beginning of this process and wanted that to be, and I think that makes a whole lot of sense, because if you can, you know, you average, this is what the cost has been increasing every year, you can kind of plan for that. But it's not just that there isn't enough money, it's this special education or these transportation where you have to pay for that somehow, some way. So what is the answer? And I'm not saying I have it, and I don't expect anybody to come up with that right now, but it's not just that we're not going to hire another teacher or we're not going to offer that program. It's other items that there's no choice but to pay for that.
Thank you, Michelle. Before Hugh, you speak again, I'd love to hear from Christopher or Zach, because we have not heard from either of them.
So yes, I want to start out by highlighting what Michelle just said and what Duncan Mr. Law said earlier as well. The issues with the special education issues alone and the unfunded mandates, these are coming from the state. And I agree that this cannot continue to be kick the can down the road. It is unsustainable. Unfortunately, the solutions are going to have to come from the state level. And when it comes to the increase in special education funds alone, this problem is going to get infinitely worse. It is clearly on a trend where it is going to continue to get worse and worse. So there is kind of there has to be a moment where, you know, a school committee is going to throw up their hands and say, I don't know what more, you know, can be done to cut. I think if we're not there, we're very close to that. That being said, I completely understand and agree with the precedent being set to change the formula being I agree with that being not the best route to take. So I would certainly support keeping the formula as it has been in the past and using the free cash in this instance. But again, the solutions unfortunately are going to have to come from beyond our ability as a town, a finance committee, or a school committee. It's going to have to come from the state level.
Thanks, Christopher. Zach, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. And my notes are a little scattered, so
that's okay.
Bear with me. We did meet with the school a few times to try to come up with an idea of what would happen, you know, if the split wasn't changed, and, you know, the issue we've been having with free cash. There was also the potential for a source of revenue by renting space at UMass Dartmouth. I mean, space for UMass Dartmouth at the old high school. I think that wasn't explored or exploited as much as it could have been, and I thought there was a really good opportunity there, even if it would offset some of the costs that the town has been spending on just roughly $150,000 a year just to upkeep that building. We didn't explore that option. I think during that time, the other idea that came up was that we get rid of pre-K, that at some point we didn't have pre-K, and there's money in that that could kind of offset or handle the issue of not having much money in there. That was mentioned once and really not explored further to see the ramifications. And then it kind of came back to us because we met with members of the select board and the school committee all together to kind of discuss this. Not once did we get into detail about adjusting the split. When all was said and done, the revenue option just had fizzled out. The pre-K option was never explored in further detail. And then they proposed to change the split that they didn't bring up at all in our prior meetings. I'm on the side that we have to vote against the split because the chance of it, the potential of its permanence and not knowing if that could be changed and the other impacts it has towards the other departments. I think that, like Karen had mentioned, the only other option if we vote against that split is to make up some of this deficit in free cash, which I think would be a better solution than potentially putting that in permanence. And I think there are another avenue or two that we could look at to offset what we would have to provide in free cash if we didn't do the split, such as Article 27 and Article 44. Article 44 being the master clock money that's left over that the later Article 45 votes to put towards the special ed capitalization fund. And then I think Article 27 was the appropriation for the parking lot, which I think we already voted on last week, but I'm just trying to get creative and think here. How else can we offset some of this deficit if we vote against the change in the split, which it seems the consensus of the group so far? Because I think it's important to not only make a stand and vote against what we think is going to hurt the town in the long run, but as a finance committee, we kind of have to come up with a solution or some creative ideas too. So I think it's important to spend some time on that. I think, Karen, you alluded to one by saying, let's not do the split, let's make it free cash. Where else could we kind of offset this and chip away kind of the small, many small axes, big tree?
Karen,
Exactly.
yeah, there you go.
Yep, thanks. So just to be clear, so if the committee as a whole, right, wanted to keep the number at 652,000, which is the same number from the select board, it is very easy. There's nothing that changes in the budget. So it's just all coming from free cash versus the split. So there's nothing changes in the budget. We don't have to look for more revenue. It really, cash is fungible. We're just using the free cash to pay off the debt and we're using that revenue piece to pay off the debt. So nothing changes. So it sounds as though if we were to pursue keeping the same number as 652, it sounds as though there's general consensus to make it called all free cash and not the revenue split. So I think that's what I'm hearing. If the number were to be at 652.
Madam Chairman, I suggest we do this in two pieces.
Yeah.
Number one, I will move that we maintain the present allocation percentage-wise. That does not mean, and then I suggest we continue talking about the number. The source
Perfect.
of the number, I agree with. It's a matter of not adopting a new revenue sharing approach for all the reasons we've been talking about.
Before we do that, I just want to address something else that Zach said directly in reference to some of those articles and using how that cash is applied in some of those articles. There are restrictions if those were capital expenses when the article was initially appropriated, whether it be 2 years ago or 20 years ago. If it was for a capital purpose, Nicole was on the phone earlier. Oh yeah, Nicole's here. It would have to be applied for a capital purpose again for the same department, more or less. So there are limitations when we're taking money from an old article and applying it to a new article or for a new expense. So we would just have to be careful how we use those expenses. We couldn't use it for any kind of operating money.
But if the school is getting X amount of free cash, right, and those two items have to do with the school, could that be then put, like, could it come out of a recommendation that be put towards the school, then therefore that would open it up on the other side? Or maybe I'm just misunderstanding.
Well, I think it wouldn't identify it as a capital expense.
Right.
So I think that's where the limitations come, is how they're using the money from an old article. Nicole, are you there?
Can I just ask?
Sure, sorry.
Maybe we don't want to go too far down this
Okay.
road right now.
Okay,
Um,
right, okay. We'll
right,
stick with, there's
yeah.
a motion on the floor. There's a motion
Yeah,
on the.
let's stick with our budget.
I appreciate Cindy's contribution, but I wanted also to say that as far as Chris is concerned, forget about the state. The state's not going to do anything for us. The state at the moment is playing with $1 billion deficit. The state is using any money they have for Biden's illegals, etc. The state isn't going to do anything for us in the near future. We're on our own as far as this goes. And the only answer, as far as the money is concerned, I share all the problems of the school. They're doing the best they can, but we don't have the money. It happens everywhere. You don't have the money. You have the best intentions in the world. You still don't have the money. And it may be painful things. It may be increasing the count of pupils in a classroom. It may be this, it may be that. Pre-K and so forth was a very good point that Zach made. When I was young, many, many years ago, there wasn't any paid for by the town or whatever. People paid for their own. Now, I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying there are painful things that could be done. And the person who pulls the trigger has to be the school committee in terms of what they think is the most important and what is the least, it's all painful, but the least painful to get to where the money is.
I'm going to second use motion that's on the floor
Thank you.
to keep the formula the same.
Thank you. So there's 3 hands that are up, and I want to give you the courtesy of I don't know if you need to keep your hand up at the moment or if you're willing to vote on the motion on the floor. If your hand is still up, I will call on
Karen,
you.
are we talking about revenues here? Oh,
So
no.
what the motion is on the floor right now, Gary, is that we haven't decided on the number for the school, but the motion on the floor is to maintain the same 54% split that we have traditionally done and not change that. So in other words, if the number were ended up to be the same 652,000, it would then all come out of free cash and not partly come out of the split.
So are we taking a separate vote on whether or not we want to take it out of free cash?
Yes, that'll be a
Okay.
different vote.
Yes, the number will be a different vote. So this motion again is to maintain the split, the regular revenue sharing 54% split.
Second.
Okay, so we've any other discussion on it? So I think we can move to a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
thank you. Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zachary,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you for that, Hugh. That was very helpful to kind of do that first. Okay. So now the second element of that is the dollar amount that would come from free cash would then need to be discussed. Gary, do you still have your hand up from before?
Yeah,
or- okay, go ahead.
This is more of a question I think that I've had for quite some time. This building, the high school building, correct, is costing us $150,000 a year, pretty much to be in there to maintain. I don't know how many people are in it. You know, what's the long-term solution for this? Because I recommend that they knock it down and they build housing, which would be permanent revenue to the town, and I would have more of a feel more at ease to say, you know what, we're going to generate another $300,000 or $400,000 in revenue a year, tax revenue. Okay, it's going to go to the general fund, but I feel more comfortable that there's an increase in revenue maybe we can do a little bit more cost sharing for the schools. But what is the plan for the school? It is just sitting there costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Now 600,000 or ever since the school's been closed. Are we looking to build a new building? Are we looking to tear it down? What's the long-term approach for this?
Yeah, so those are great questions. One second, Christopher. So that's a great question, and I think that could be a 2-hour conversation. And it's not going to be solved tonight, and it doesn't affect the budget as it is right now. So I would defer that question. If we have time later tonight, I'd be happy to talk about it more, but I have a feeling by the time we finish this and start talking about water and sewer and zoning, we're going to be we're going to be maxed out. So again, first we need to get all our articles recommended tonight. So it's a great question, Gary, and I would love to hear Christopher's response to that, but I'd like to defer that question if we could.
Okay.
But it's a great question. We all have open ears to want to hear the answer to that. Go ahead, Al. You're muted, Al. There you go.
It's a question / comment about free cash, which, as most of you know at this point, drives me insane, but that's here and there. That's not the point. My understanding is that free cash comes from a budget surplus from departments within the town against what they spend, and that amount of money goes into free cash, which is, and years ago when we had the override committee, I took 15 years of annual reports, and I did a long spreadsheet. And to be honest with you, the only department in the town, except for 1 year back in the early
maybe
You
shut
froze
your
out.
video down, Al, because maybe that will help your bandwidth.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah,
Some-
we lost you at
All right,
annual
so
reports.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where my rant began or end, but what I was saying is, in a nutshell, is that every town department gives back money every year. Budgeting, as we know, is not a precise process. You know, you budget, you hope, things change, they go up, they go down, but money goes back from those departments into the town budget, which becomes free cash. The only, which is 54% of the entire town budget, that only 1 year in the last 15 years has given back, and it was $54,000 out of a $22 million budget, was the school department. So the month, what's that?
So I don't think that's accurate, Al. I know
Well,
the
it's
the police department, others are giving back money.
No, I think you missed his word. I think you missed his word. He said they're the only ones that did not give back.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ed.
Yeah.
See it right.
Yeah, they're the only ones that did not.
Not
give
get,
back.
so the free cash that we're shifting around, and yes, money is fungible or whatever, back to the school department, is the only department that basically has never given money back to the town. So I just want to lay that on the table.
I just said, Al, what you say is accurate, but there's more to it. Free cash is also, we allocate based on an estimate of revenues. And that is the amount that goes into these budgets, et cetera. To the extent we receive more money than the estimate and allocated, that ends up being free cash as well.
Fair enough. I'll give you that, Hugh. But I think from a sacrificial standpoint, there are a lot of departments within the town, and there are a lot of services that the taxpayers of the town should be being rewarded for that are not, because they're giving budget money back to the town.
I think that's a matter of department heads trying to be responsible to the town, et cetera, squeezing a nickel to save money to give back for just these reasons. Not a matter of so much not spending because they have reasons, but they want to give it back.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Hugh, and I'll leave it at this. If I were, for example, the fire chief or police chief, I wouldn't give back a penny to the town. I'd use it all to bring back the cops that need to be there, or the fire.
But I think the answer, I can speak with reference to the police department in the past. First of all, the amounts involved aren't big enough to do things like hire new people, et cetera. And so it's a question of trying to save and be as efficient as you can.
Right.
All right, so I'd like us to keep moving.
Yep.
The theory of free cash is great, but we need to vote on a budget tonight. The second part is how much free cash, right? So in my view, from my personally view, I will vote no on any budget that has 652,000 in there. I would vote yes on any budget that had 400,000 in there in accordance with the plan. I could possibly be convinced to do 500,000, which is the same amount as last year. I would say no to anything over 500,000. That's where I'm at.
As always, I'm ready to make a comment. And I'll wait my turn if others are interested.
You go ahead, Al. Go ahead, Hugh. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, I think this is sort of a matter of principle as much as anything. I mean, again, we know all this stuff is painful for the departments involved. I don't mean to sound as if being cavalier about the school committee just wave their hand and make things balance. Having said that, I think the cut is necessary, and trying to be as generous as we can be, I would go with the 500 figure.
Do you want to make that a motion?
And Hugh, let me agree with you.
We'll go around and see others comment
yeah.
by others either before or after. I will move to make it 500 for discussion. People can say what
Sure.
they want.
I would second that.
Thank you.
Second that too. Let's do it.
Thank you. And just to, I may seem cold on this, but I am very sympathetic to the budget, and I feel horrible, and I don't sleep at night because of this. And, but I think we need to move in the direction of controlling this and just not continuing to make this worse, because next year will be worse. So, okay. So we have a motion on the table and a second for 500,000. Does anyone else have any discussions on this, or do we want to move to a roll call?
Let's move.
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. Okay, Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, no.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, no.
Al,
Ally's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
You're on mute.
Sorry, Michelle Orlando, no.
Zachary,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. How I lost count. How many no's do we have here?
3.
We have 3 no's. Okay. Okay. All right. What does that mean? Okay. So I guess putting that in the budget frees up 152,000 of free cash that's not needed for the operating budget, which then becomes available to the free cash to then put in other places. Okay. Go ahead, Zach.
And this is maybe just for my own clarification. Did you see Nicole's response when it came up to what article money could be repurposed as in the comments?
Oh, I didn't look, but we can only repurpose. Okay.
So therefore, I'm just curious, Article 27 and Article 44, if along with the situation we're at, I mean, there's potentially $96,000 there. is that at all in part of our recommendation? Can we make a recommendation on the budget line item, but also include and remind people that if we were to vote to put that towards free cash, it would help us out?
It shows
Right.
up in next year's free cash.
Next year's, okay.
Yeah, it has to go through the system to next year.
Right.
Understood. Kind of irrelevant, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of this budget, so the budget that was sent to everyone with the FinCom numbers in there. So we can finalize it. Sounds like I don't think there's anything else. So we would reduce the need for free cash by 152,000 on the revenue side, and then we would reduce the school number by 152,000. Everything else stays balanced. Okay. Okay, so. All right, thank you, Nicole. Nicole's got to go. Thank you for coming. Okay, so anything else on the budget? If not, then we can approve the budget as a whole. So it's the same budget that was sent earlier, and then after tomorrow, I'll redo the numbers and I'll send it off to everyone. I can't do it while I'm on my laptop now, but it would reduce the revenue. It would reduce the free cash by 152,000, and it would reduce the school number by 152,000. Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the budget as a whole, subject to those two the changes that we voted on?
Do you need a number? Do you need an exact number?
Yeah. Do we know if it was 652? It wouldn't hurt, would it?
652, 125.
So 152, 125 is our reduction in both the school expense and the free cash. Okay. So if I can entertain a motion that would.
Oh, do you have the number though?
What, 152, 125?
Oh, no, for the total budget. You don't want to do a number for Article 4 as a whole total number?
Oh, I need to sit there and
Yeah,
calculate that
okay.
out.
All right.
Can we
Okay.
wait till next week, or is that something that has to be done tonight?
I can do this tomorrow, and I'll send Jim our revised budget, and then he
Okay.
and I can kind of work through the article to make sure, and with Nicole as well. So they'll take care of that.
Okay, so we can vote on it in total.
Right, subject to our changes, right? Yeah,
Okay.
if we vote on the budget as a whole, then Nicole and Jim can fill in these numbers.
Okay. I'll make that motion that we make a recommendation to approve Article 4, the budget
As amended.
as amended. No, actually, it's the same number, right,
Okay.
Karen? It's the same number, but a different source of revenue.
So we're reducing the free cash number by 152, 125, and then we're reducing the school expense number by 152, 125.
Okay.
So I'll second Cindy's
Okay,
motion.
so we've got a motion, a second.
Gary, do you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Yeah, this discussion.
Yes.
Okay, again, just to go back to a comment that I made earlier, I will not support this budget because I feel that coming from the select board, we've had unbalanced budgets and, dipping into the piggy bank, if you will, and pushing this down the road 5 years is doing an injustice to the school department. And I completely support the schools. I just do not support this process that will lead to an ultimate, a department that's already hamstrung down the road. So, it's nothing against the schools, it's nothing against any other department, but I'm voting no.
Okay. But what would your suggestion to become a yes? Like what would,
I would suggest that the select board need to come up with a process with the schools to look at every single one of their line items and say, okay, I made a suggestion that if 80% of our budget is payroll, why don't we start a stabilization fund? Put this money in a stabilization fund so that we can address contractual issues and have the schools and every other department live within their budget, a 2.5% budget. But that went nowhere, and I get it. People are not in favor in some of these circumstances, but I think the conversation needs to start with the select board. It's very easy to throw a budget back at us that is unbalanced. And as much as we want to think it is unbalanced. And it's been for a decade. And this process will never straighten out. And now it just so happens the schools are the ones that are going to be having an issue 5 years or 4 years down the road. We hope we get free cash in the next 4 years. And we don't even take into considering inflation. I mean, these budgets are going to continue to escalate. And will $400,000 be okay next year? Will $300,000 be okay in fiscal 27? We have no idea. I mean, these numbers were just thrown out there. So conversation needs to, if we could wave a magic wand, we shouldn't even be accepting a budget from the select board with $1 in free cash to balance a budget. But we don't have, what do? We throw it back to them and tell them, okay, figure it out. It's our problem.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Gary. I mean, we had 3 joint meetings, and all our conversations were the 5-year plan was to really go decrease 100,000 a year, and I think we were all kind of, and that's the best plan anybody could come up with, and I was willing for that, and then I wasn't willing when something changed, as it did.
I mean, we're all here shaking our heads on this. I mean, we've been like this forever. What's the solution? We get a budget from them that's unbalanced. That's.
And I suggest we're not going to solve that tonight. We should move ahead and do something useful.
Right, and we won't solve it next year. We won't solve it the year after, and the year after that. And that's the reason why we're in this position that we're in. We just keep saying we're never going to resolve it.
We're in this position.
How do we get out of this? We just keep accepting budgets that are not prudent. That's what we do, and that's the reason why I'm voting no. All
right, thank you, Gary. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and while we were doing that, I did come up to some numbers, but I don't think we need to worry. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. So any other discussion before we move to a roll call? No one's hands up. Okay, so Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary?
No.
Christopher?
I'm going to vote no as well. Christopher Thrasher, no.
Al?
Al Lee's aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Thank you. Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
Thank you. And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so give me 1 second. I just want to calculate my numbers for 1 second. Take a break, have a drink of water.
Take a deep breath.
Give me a second, because we need to know the free cash number for future articles, and I just want to make sure I got it. Since we did lose the town accountant.
Karen, by the way, in your calculation of the budget, you have to increase it by 25,000 for the animal control officer.
I did, and I already had put that
Okay.
in there, but thank
All
you
right.
for the reminder. Yes, I had already put that in the R side. Okay. Okay, so thank you for that. All right, so now let's move on to the rest of the financial articles before we do the other ones. So the other financial articles are
Duncan, could you put your thing on?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm dipping to the end here.
Karen, we have the transfer articles. Did we go through those?
We did not yet. I was thinking we could talk about the school
Free cash.
stabilization and then the free
Okay.
cash, and then we
All right.
can zip back while we're in the brain of free cash and everything.
Okay.
So Article 43 is the establishment of the special education stabilization fund. Then Article 44 was looking to move some funds into that fund. And then Article 45 is the capital stabilization fund and then the stabilization fund. So those are the four that I think will kind of wrap up where we're at with the budget. Go ahead, Hugh.
You're on mute.
I'm curious, I just looked at those, and it seems that we're moving, what they do is move money from an appropriation for a clock system into educational services. I don't have any objection to it, but it seems to contradict what we said a minute ago about capital versus operating funds.
It is, and I think that's what Zach was referring to, and that's what Nicole had responded to. So Zach was way ahead of us.
Her
Thinking ahead.
response actually, is to Yu's point. It's too bad that Nicole had to leave. Her response is, can only repurpose the article for another project or return it and let it fall to free cash. So
I
she
wouldn't
said,
think a stabilization fund is a project, but anyway, that sounds like capital. I don't mean to be obstructive here. I don't care much about it. I just
right,
mean
because
to
it's
insist on what we're saying.
It's
Right.
not a capitalizable expense, having a special
Right.
education fund. A capital stabilization fund is one thing.
Right.
If we used it for Article 45, but
Yeah.
43 and 44, I think, could be suspect. Yes, I agree with you, Yu.
I guess that's for Jim, isn't it?
Well, it'd be
What's
for
that?
KP Law, I guess, to determine whether or not that that's appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not against doing it. I just don't, as you say, it seems a little questionable, a better word, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think, we can always, we can proceed and make our recommendation, assuming that it's legal. We're not the experts. And then if we find out tomorrow that it's not, then we'll have to,
Yeah.
the select board themselves will have to modify the article on town floor if it's not appropriate.
So I'm not sure if you want motions at this point, but if you do, I would move to approve the article subject to the ruling you're talking about.
Well, I think we've got to do the one preceding first.
Yeah,
So
I
the
understand,
first one, right, the first one is
You're
to
out of-
actually
out of order.
establish. So the first one is Article 43. That would be to establish a special education reserve fund. So first that would have to get established first before any funds could be moved into it.
And I would move to recommend that, the theory. We're creating a receptacle.
Second,
Doesn't do
Yep.
any harm.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. So I want to talk about this fund from my perspective as well. So
Zach
I
has
am-
his hand up too.
okay, great. So I'm in support of a special education stabilization fund. I think that's a good idea where money can go into. So when there's a special need for the special education, that there's a special place for it to go. My issue that I have with this stabilization fund is that this stabilization fund by state law only requires the school committee as a majority and the select board as a majority to pull funds out of the account. So all the other stabilization funds require town meeting to move money out. So I had asked the question, I would be really in favor of this if somehow the bylaw could be added that the finance committee also be the third body that also approves this, since there is not town meeting that's doing it. So Jim did ask the question of the attorney, and they recommended leave it as the statute has. And I still question that, because I thought a local bylaw could always be stricter than what the state requires. So I still have an issue with it just being the school committee and the select board. So not thinking of, you know, the current finance committee and the current select board, I believe, have a good working collaborative relationship, but this is going to be a bylaw. So 5, 10, 15 years from now, those two bodies may not always be in sync. And by having the finance committee as the third watchdog, the third tier, is always helpful. And if it's not in the bylaw, then things could happen that maybe should be looked at a little more closely. So I have an issue that we're not a part of this spending. And I don't know if we can, if anybody feels the same way. I suppose we could always make a recommendation to still add us to the bylaw in our motion. But I don't know.
Zach
That's all I have to say.
Zach had his hand up, yeah.
Yeah, I would second kind of your main point there. And at the end of this article, you know, special education, out of district tuition, transportation and recovery of high school tuition, and or take any other action relative thereto. I just think it's a little bit ambiguous. I think that it already captures $55,000 that could go towards free cash for next year. And I think that this wasn't the only money that came back out of a school program that didn't happen that could then get put towards free cash and go back into that pot. If this becomes approved, then it'll fall under, in my opinion, that would fall under another space that money could be reallocated instead of being put towards free cash. I don't know. I would have to just second what you said, Karen. It doesn't seem appropriate right here.
And I'm sure this wording is exactly state law. So there's no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just adding an extra layer of kind of the watchdog point from the finance standpoint. Go ahead, Michelle.
My question is, so the other stabilization funds that are already established, they require, I don't know how to ask the question. Is it just town meeting that they require a vote?
Yes.
They don't, like, it's not like a recommendation. Well, I guess it's always a recommendation if it's on the
Right.
town warrant. But
In
the
fact, it
final is
requires
the town meeting.
Two-thirds vote in some cases. Yeah, 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
2/3 vote. So why would this one be different than those?
The state law, it's a state law, I think, and I'm not the expert. So as I understand why this one is different is because the school may, during the course of the year, may need it immediately or
Right,
quickly
to pay the bill.
as
Right.
opposed to, then they would otherwise, the town would then have to have a special town meeting.
Right, that makes sense.
And then appropriate it. So this allows for the funds to get to the school quicker. So
And I appreciate the fact that you'd want like another tier, somebody to watch over, but if it is established as a special education reserve fund, I think there would have to be an accounting of what they're using the money for. They'd have to put that out there.
but who's going to ask for the accounting? So
Well,
the select board won't necessarily.
It would still have to go through the accountant, the town accountant, and she
Yeah.
would be presented with a bill that would have to comply with the law. So she couldn't take a bill from, Home Depot for special education expenses. It would still have another test to pass through the town
Agreed.
accountant that it's a
Well,
valid expense.
So
Right,
let
right,
me,
right.
so let me just give an example. So the school budget is $20 million. And again, I'm not saying this school or any school, I'm just giving an example, 10 years down the road, this could happen, right? So nothing to do with any school admin person personally here. So the school, right, the school gets $20 million budget. Now the school is able to spend that $20 million on any line item they choose, so they're not restricted. So let's say in that $20 million, they represented, well, 500,000 is going to be for special education. That's how they presented the budget to the finance committee and it got approved. What if during the year they had other expenses that were appropriate and said, well, we really need to take that 500,000 that was initially allocated that we said was for the special education, and we're going to spend it somewhere else on some other program. So now there's no money in the budget for special education because they spent it. So now someone comes to the special education, the special stabilization fund to say, we don't have any money, so we need it. Me being on the finance committee would want to understand, well, how did you spend? Your budget was 500,000. Can you show how you spent that to show how you needed more? So those are the questions that the finance folks are going to ask, as opposed to maybe not the select board or other groups would ask.
Karen.
Go ahead, Hugh.
I think you made the case a minute ago in passing as to why it isn't necessary, and after you made the case for why it was necessary. Because as we know, the school committee doesn't get all its money and spend it all in one day. It's spent over the course of a year. So they have a budget for months and months of expenditures. If they have an emergency expense for special ed without money, they can take it out of all kinds of different accounts, subject to sorting it out later when those funds become available. I was going on the basis that this is a way, in the sense of expanding the school's budget, because otherwise, I know special ed spending and reimbursement is in arrears, shall we say. So you spend the money and then next year you get money back when you may not have the expenses, so it's up and down. Nice to spread it out. On the other hand, that money that comes back goes into free cash, and then it's subject to the normal appropriation process. So after having gone round and round on it, I come to the conclusion, I don't, quite apart from the additional restrictions, which I don't have no objection to, I'm not all sure it does any good in the first place. I'm inclining toward not voting in favor of it.
Okay.
I mean, what's the difference? We control the reserve fund. We're the only body in town that has control over that. Select board doesn't, school committee doesn't. So I don't know. I don't know if I understand the oversight. Believe me, I understand the oversight, but I think that we may want to look at it as we have control over an account that has a substantial amount of money in it. That,
well, 50,000.
Well, yeah, I mean, that probably should have more.
Right. I don't think that this account is ever going to grow to a substantial amount of money in any given year. And, you know, at some point we have to let the powers that be, you know, if they do funny business, that's their problem. If they do funny business and we're involved with it, then it becomes our problem too. You know, the statute was set up that way. You know, there is a line that it's like, fine. I mean, they control their budget line items anyway. And what does, you know, you're never going to get to the bottom of anything if you're suspect of things. There are other ways to account for it. You know,
what's the source of revenue?
The source for this article would be, you know, we would have to appropriate money every year. I don't think it's ever going to get to a very large sum because they're going to tap into it from time to time, obviously, and we would feed it with some money. I don't think we would ever have more than, you know, a couple $100,000 at a time to ever put into it. I don't think this is going to be a big source of money that anybody's going to try to manipulate one way or the other back and forth. I think there's a limit as to how. I totally get the checks and balances and the three-party system. I totally get it. I don't think this is the place to fight the battle over it.
Thank you, Cindy. Go ahead, Al.
We can barely fund the stabilization fund for the town. I would add another one to it on top of it. I mean, it just, and then it's going to be just like free cash and everything else, that everybody is going to be groveling for the crumbs. It's like Oliver Twist, may I please have some more, sir? And it's I don't see where this really. The only thing this stabilization fund highlights to me, and this is probably over the top at this time of the night, is it shows the stupidity of the state legislature for creating a system that the towns need to have a stabilization fund to fund unfunded mandates that to play.
Right.
It's kind of
Right.
nuts, really.
You have to create a bank account just to fund the things that the state forced down your throat.
Right.
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 Yeah. But so in support of this stabilization fund, just to say, right? So if it's designed just for special education, then it really does take the blips, the ups and downs out of the budget that we just approved, right? So we talked about, well, the reason in part this year, the budget that the school needs more money is because their expenses are so high. Well, you wouldn't have that situation if there were reserves sitting in the stabilization fund. Then you can maintain a level operating budget where you don't have those. So I'm talking in favor of it, right? So this is me now supporting. I support it conceptually. I just don't support the lack of checks and balances.
And if I might, I've gone round and round on this as we've talked, and they come to your conclusion that don't think of it as stabilization fund. Say it's a surge tank. The idea is that you spend the money one year and get reimbursement the next year from the state. So you get the reimbursement and stick it here. And as we've all been saying, that is then a reserve against the next year's school budget when they're estimating, or they find out they've underestimated what the special ed for the year turns out to be. There is a fund there which came from prior reimbursement that helps out with this year. So having gone round and round and round, I come to a favorable position on it.
Thank you, Hugh.
And probably, with this proposal that I had given for the contractual increases, dumping money in there, that would require 2/3 vote at town meeting. That could have been used for special ed, for any kind of uptick in salaries or anything like that in any one of these programs. So that would have been probably a better way to approach this, instead of having, we don't have the checks and balances, but 2/3 vote at town meeting. Does this require 2/3? No, this doesn't require 2/3 vote of anything.
No.
This one has a funding source, and that is the reimbursement of the state in this one category. So that helps to keep it under control.
Right. And just to counter my own argument of checks and balances, right? So the finance committee will make recommendations on any money going in. So into it. So the select board and school committee would have the authorization coming out. The finance committee wouldn't necessarily be part of that approval process, but certainly could ask after the fact to see how the accounting happened. Right. And if there was any level of questionable things, the finance committee could never approve to fund it in the future, right? So it wouldn't happen again, right? Because you wouldn't allow more money to go in if it wasn't working as appropriate. So there are checks on that side.
I will move to recommend in favor.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussions? So as we go through these, I really would appreciate to hear from everybody in terms of the deliberations, because what always pains me is if there's silence and then it comes to vote time and it's a no, or it's something contrary where if somebody has some sort of issue, it'd be nice to hear what you have to say.
It's always the quiet ones.
Yeah.
You know it's not me.
Anything, Duncan, Christopher?
Yeah,
Michelle?
I'm fine with it. I don't have strong feelings on this. I mean, I think more oversight is better than less, but I don't want to challenge the great state of Massachusetts and
All right.
their
Great.
wisdom.
Right. Thanks. Thanks.
That's my exact
right.
feelings.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's just appreciative if somebody, if members of the committee are in favor of it, if someone has a different viewpoint, it's really helpful to hear. So that is part of the deliberations. And Hugh himself admitted he turned around 3 different times through our discussions, and that's what the discussions are all about, right? So that's important for us to do. So I guess
I'm
I'll,
willing to bet by the end. I was just going to say I'm willing to bet by the end of the night you all have probably heard quite enough from me. So limiting it for certain things anyway.
all right, keep your bullets in your pocket. All right, so I will do a roll call at this point. So Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lees, nay.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, nay.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Karen Rouse, nay. Thank you. All right, so Article 44 is now that, assuming that at town meeting, the town will approve that article. The next article would be to start to fund that special education stabilization fund a bit. And Article 44 is looking to put the 55,000 that was at a prior article into there.
This is the one that we question whether or
Yeah.
not its use is
My
correct.
suggestion would be that we assume it's legal, and let's vote assuming that whoever put the warrant together did it. And I think it's been reviewed by legal counsel already. So, and if we find out afterwards, we can change our motion on the floor if something's different.
I'll move in favor on that theory.
Second,
Where's the money coming again from, Karen?
So
Just to
this
recap.
one's coming from, so there was an article on last year's town meeting, and it was a capital to purchase a master clock paging system, and I guess they didn't need to do that after all. So instead
well,
of,
no, they did it, but they did it wirelessly versus hardwire, and the cost was significantly lower.
okay,
Well, we can move from a capital request to a stabilization fund.
That's what
Well,
we're talking about.
that's what we're questioning.
I thought the request had to be rescinded. And
well,
because
that is what.
Oh,
theory,
wait a minute. In a
Look
prior
at the-
article, didn't we rescind it in a prior article?
We did.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
It is rescinded in a prior article. Wait a minute. I'll come up with
Oh,
Oh.
not this one, I don't think.
You don't think so? Because I
No.
thought that's where we saw that it came from an article dated 2023. This one
because
doesn't show that.
Nicole has that segregated on the ledger for that capital request. So
Right, but no,
I don't
I'll find the article. We can move on, but I'll find the article.
Okay.
You want to
we'll
move on to
let's
another one?
skip over that for 1 second. Okay, so the next 2 articles is to fund, the next article 45 is to fund the capital stabilization fund. So the select board, they gave us their free cash estimates of, and were proposing to add $100,000 to the capital stabilization fund and $100,000 to the regular stabilization fund. And then that would leave over a balance at what they had as 195,000, which Jim was suggesting just to leave it in free cash. So then it would roll over into next year's free cash. So this way, next year wouldn't start with 0.
Right.
So from that standpoint, since we changed the budget a little bit, we have 152,000 more in free cash than what we had. So we can, leave the 152 to stay in free cash, or we can add that 152 into either the capital stabilization fund or the regular stabilization fund.
I'd leave it as a start to next year, but others may differ.
Karen, I'm in favor. Do we know if this is for longer term projects, like 5 to 10 years out, or shorter?
Well,
Do we know?
for the capital stabilization,
Yes, yes.
I think the plan was, since they really have been trying to put together a 5-year plan they're really starting to see that there's such significant backlog. So, there's things that need to be purchased pretty regularly that we can start to be building a fund for it. So when the town does need to buy $1 million fire truck, or something like that, there's some funds that are there that can help that.
Oh, okay.
So it's not, as far as I know, it's not for a particular project. It's for ongoing needs of equipment. So when they're in, and I think Cindy can answer because she's on the capital.
Right. So it's a way to just start building up a nest egg when the day comes when we don't have free cash to be able to buy a pickup truck. So it's just a way to save for a rainy day. Karen, you may be right about that article, because there were some other articles that were rescinded, and then the appropriation was used, but not that specific one. But I could have sworn there was one that showed that it was from an article dated 2023. So I'm going to keep looking here a little bit.
Okay.
So you can go on.
Okay. So, so we have a total of, so let me just get the total, 370 plus 152. So there's a total, if my math is right, which I hope it is, there's a $522,000 of free cash now. So it can go into, again, any combination that this committee feels, capital stabilization fund, the regular stabilization fund, or the free cash to let it roll into next year. I would say this extra free cash to throw it into the capital stabilization fund to make that 250. I think there's a lot of capital needs.
Yeah.
That would be a suggestion that I would throw out there.
Just remember that fire truck is going to have to get replaced.
Yeah. So I would say, so if doing that, that would be 250 to the capital stabilization fund, keeping 100,000 to the regular stabilization fund, and then the balance would be to the leaving it in free cash.
So move.
All right, let me just get a number for us, just so make sure. You're so trusting of my numbers, Q.
Oh, yes. You're an accountant.
I am, but it is 8:30 at night and I'm on my little phone calculator. I'm not in Excel.
You're going to be more accurate than I would be.
Okay. Right. So that would be, okay. So if it were 250 to the capitalization, 100 to stabilization fund, and that would be approximately the 172,000 to the free cash carryover. So that would work. Okay. And there was a motion.
All right, thank you.
Make a second.
All right. Thank you. So that would be a motion for Article 45 to do 250,000, and then Article 46 to do 100,000. That's
Gary and Al have their hands up.
Go ahead, Gary. Thank you.
No, I'm all set.
Okay.
And I just have a quick comment. A few meetings ago, Cindy, I believe, it doesn't matter, brought up the point about the police department cruisers. And every year, it seems as though we're replacing 1, 2, possibly 3 cruisers.
Right.
Yeah, I would suggest, this is not for tonight's meeting by any stretch, but when we're talking about capital stabilization, that we may want to consider mixing up that formula a little bit and building in, whether it is half or all of the cruisers, into operating expenses. It may not be GAAP accounting, but on the flip side, it's something that I think we should take up at a future meeting, and maybe not just that meeting, but you know, that the police stand out, if you will, because they've got 30 or 40 cars and they're constantly replacing. So just wanted to bring it up.
They
Now,
do
that
have a lot of
historically
cars.
Historically, those have come in and out of the operating budget and the capital budget from year to year and day and so forth. It's not a matter of where there's money to deal with it. And there's a lengthy exposition that I'm sure the chief now has, but in terms of how it's more economical to keep funds that don't do much and last a long time and replace them rather than have a major replacement at some time. So it's been thrashed out a lot over the years.
All right, let's keep on moving. So we've got a motion and a second.
Take a vote.
All right, so I'm doing a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary?
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Madam Chair, my apologies. Are we voting on Article 45 and 46 as one?
yes, that was the motion. Did you want to pull those apart?
I would, but I don't know if it's in order at this time. So if it's not, I'll just abstain.
We can
hear what you have to say.
We'll go back to deliberation. So go ahead.
So my thought is that as a general point, I make a distinction between the capital stabilization fund and the stabilization fund. I understand this is not going to be, I'm not going to die on this particular hill. But that being said, I would be inclined not to fund additional monies from the free cash to the stabilization fund, and would be inclined to do the capital stabilization fund. But again, not a hill I'm prepared to die on tonight. So.
Well, and so rather than the 100,000 going into the stabilization fund, do you have a suggestion what to do with that 100,000?
Frankly, I would put that in the capital station. Capital stabilization.
So your suggestion to put so 350 into the capital stabilization and 0 into stabilization. Is that what you're?
The town treasurer has always lamented that, for a town with the budget size that we have, we really should have close to 5 to 7% at least in a stabilization fund, which is basically a rainy day fund, and we have well below that. And we've always tried to put some pennies that we've picked up on the floor to put into the regular stabilization fund, to at least make an effort for the rating agencies to see that we are trying to make sure that we have adequate funding in the case of an emergency. That's what the purpose. I'm just providing you an explanation of why they put the.
Karen, have we stopped contributing to OPEB?
No, that's in the budget.
Yeah.
Oh.
The most
Not as
recent
much
audit,
as,
Gary, I think we're at about 13-14%, which is twice above the state average.
Okay.
So yeah, so just to add to what Cindy said, Christopher, so we've always been, as the treasurer goes out for debt borrowings and bonding, what they want to see and what our credit history, they want to see that we're continuing to fund and increase the stabilization fund. So that's something they look for. So so that is kind of why putting a token $100,000 kind of helps us along a little bit. Hugh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, along those lines, the money, the amount counts, but I think that the progress also helps. So it's more important to put something in than it is maybe the amount that we put in. So I'd stay with where we were, though I understand they're both important
Right. Thank you.
requirements.
Okay, so we still have the same motion on the floor. I don't hear anyone looking to change the motion. So I will go back to a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
did you say aye?
I did, yes.
Okay, thank you. You kind of cut out right at the end, so thank you. Al,
Al Lee's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. And so that takes care of 45 and 46. Okay, so we've got a few,
So if you want to go back to that special ed
yeah,
stabilization one?
sure.
Yeah, I did not find, I thought that there had been a prior article rescinding the 55,000. So we do have a question here. We can vote on it, as you said, subject to making sure that it's correct.
Right.
I make a motion that we approve recommendation, or we recommend approval of Article 44.
And again, for
second.
Gary or whoever, so Article 44 is moving 55,000 from what was a article last year for some excess capital, moving it into the Special Education Stabilization Fund.
Provided it's allowed.
Right. Any other discussions? If not, I'll move to a motion. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al, you're on mute. Almost have stepped away.
all right, we'll skip over him for a second. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, nay.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Karen Rouse is nay. And let's see if Al's back. All right,
Al,
I'm
Al,
gonna
are you
take this,
there?
I'm gonna take this moment to go get a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Did Al come back?
There he is.
Al, you there?
You're on mute.
I
We're
had
voting.
a need, so I'm sorry about that.
It's
Yeah,
all right.
We waited. So we were on Article 44, which
Okay.
was moving the funds from the master clock paging system capital and putting it into the special education fund.
Okay, thank you.
So
We need
you
your vote.
we need your vote.
My turn to vote. I'm conflicted about this one, to be honest with you, but just help me out a little bit. Is this subject to the attorney's comment about going from capital to
It
operational?
would be, yep, it would be assuming that it was appropriate. So
Okay, fair
we're assuming
But
it is.
also assuming 43 passes.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I will vote aye, subject to that.
Okay, great. All right, so now we've got everybody. Okay, so we got a couple little scrappy little articles and then we've got some big ones. So let's go back to scrappy, nothing scrappy, right? But let's see. Let's talk, while we're in the 40s, let's talk about Rita Lane for a second, which is Article 42. I sent you an email from Jim from the attorney about this public way. I don't really know what to make of this.
Well, as I said to you, Karen, we have not been told that whether or not this road is up to spec. I mean, that's always been our number one criteria. Does the highway department approve that this be accepted as a full road for it to be maintained as such? I know that, they're questioning the White Oak Run thing. Well, that's kind of a chicken and egg thing. It still doesn't help whether or not they're going to approve Rita Lane. They have a dilemma because they've approved part of a street that's off of an unapproved street. And
it's not unknown for us to say recommendation we made at town meeting, because we don't have all the facts.
right. So you're suggesting that we make no recommendation?
Yeah, we've said in the past, we will recommend at town meeting.
Yeah.
And we don't
okay.
have the facts to know what to do. If it's not up to spec, we shouldn't do it. If it is up to spec, we probably should.
Yep. I agree.
All right, motion?
So move.
Second. Yep.
Any other comments on that? All right, we're gonna go, roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan.
Duncan Law, aye.
Thank you. And Karen Rouse, aye. All right. So, I feel like I'm a little all over the place here. So let's see. Let's do Article 22. We're working kind of backwards a little bit. We're skipping over the planning board and the water and sewer for the moment, but we're going to get back to those soon. I want to clear off all the littler ones. So Article 22 was deleting with qualified nitrogen reducing systems. That's not, in my opinion, that's not even a finance implication. So I think
Right, we passed that over because we didn't feel that it needed
Right.
a recommendation.
I think we can make no recommendation on that one.
Correct.
We have to make make a recommendation that we have no recommendation, right?
So moved. Do you have to take a vote on that?
I think we do, because we have
Really?
to write that and we have to make that is our recommendation that we have
Is
no
that we have no recommendation?
I know.
All right, I'll make a motion that we make no recommendation on Article 22.
Second,
Hugh, are you with us? Hugh?
He's on mute. You're on mute, you. There you
The
go.
article, Hugh Morton, aye.
Thank you. Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's with a caveat. It's not the purview of, in my opinion, of finance committee, but it does have financial implications for the individuals that are affected. So I just want to, acknowledge them, but I would say aye as well.
thank you. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach.
No recommendation is a recommendation.
That is correct.
So aye.
It's very confusing. Duncan
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. All right, so we're I think we're getting closer here. I missed Article 32. So I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place now. I missed one.
Oh, it's a lot of
Which is
pages now to scroll.
I know, I'm sorry. I thought I was on it, but I missed it. Article 32 is to establish the fiber
Oh, okay.
to make it an elected board.
I don't believe that has any financial implications for the town, just establishing a board. That really has nothing to do with
Right.
the operation of such.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we're not even there yet. And we the Internet Advisory Committee hasn't agreed that it should be whether it should be appointed or elected.
I suggest we make no recommendation. It
Yep.
does not have, as Duncan just said, it's rather confused at this point. I raised some questions on this kind of article last year because that article had in it issuing various bonds and notes and things like that, which nobody seemed to have an answer to, so we didn't do anything. This one doesn't have that element, so there's no reason to do it, but I don't think it, we'll find out more before we actually have to take a real action. So meanwhile, no recommendation at the moment.
I would agree with you. I would move that we make no recommendation on this article.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
Nope.
Okay, so I will do a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher abstained.
thank you. Al,
Al Lees, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rose, aye. All right, so now I think we have, Cindy, you can help me on your chart, but I think we've just got
Yeah.
Article 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And then we've got the water sewer and the planning board article. So I think are the only two left, right? So we've got
Correct.
Article
Yeah,
2
this
and 3,
21 was removed,
right?
whatever that
And
was.
Article 1 was removed. Okay.
Right.
So Article 2 is the transfer of funds from one department to another.
I wish Nicole was still on the phone.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
In Article 2, from free cash to opioid settlement account, $124,000.
Right.
What's
It
that?
had to be, it had to be separated. It came through in the free cash as a cash balance we were carrying. So we submitted it as cash, and the state removed and reclassified it as it has to go into an opioid settlement account, which I don't know who has control of that as to how.
I didn't know we had one.
Well, it was established from these monies that were received by the state in the settlement with the company that distributed it. So I'm sure that there are strings attached, that it will be used for, drug abuse training programs and that type of thing. I don't know the particulars of it, but I
Okay.
know that our free cash was higher, except this reduced it because it had to be separated out.
Right.
Thank you. It was a mysterious item to me.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
around to inform us.
I don't really have an issue. The beach ones were related more to their increased expenses over the summer that were not anticipated at the time. And so their account needs to be adjusted as a result of that. I don't have any
No.
issue with these.
I don't have any issues either.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of Article 2 in the amount of $240,571.07 as printed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Does anyone want to discuss anything on this article, or if not, no discussions, then I'll go into a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, I.
thank you. Al,
Al Lees, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Mm. You may have
Duncan
taken a
Law,
break.
aye. Sorry.
that's okay. Thank you. And Karen Rouse, aye. All right, Article 3 is to fix the salaries of the town officers.
I think that the interesting part of this article, and this is nitpicking, it says to vote to fix the salary and compensation of all elected town officials, which is not correct. The planning board doesn't receive a stipend, nor does the school committee. So it says all elected officials. It should be listed elected officials.
Yeah,
Is it
that's
not?
true.
It's not
Well,
all
you-
of them.
Right. You're right. I mean, maybe you should, make that as a edit point to send to Jim.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know. Maybe they are missing a word somewhere, or maybe no one's ever noticed they're missing a word everywhere. Go ahead, Michelle.
And I'm just wondering, when they say vote to fix, is it a raise? What does it mean by fix exactly?
It's like
Correct.
a fix. It's really like a fix, right? I mean,
Right.
it should be set. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
3 letters. Instead of fix, it should be set.
So, but it's changing the compensation.
It is. I think they, and I don't remember off exactly, it's the same 2 or 2.5% raise from last year. Yeah, something like that. I don't know exactly. Don't quote me on that, but it's in that range.
But it is to increase it.
Yes,
Probably not to decrease it. Okay.
correct.
But
Yes.
remember, I mean, to remind us all, this is just proposing. The motion is what actually will probably recite the same numbers, but the motion is the action, which is not here. That will be provided by town council usually, or Steve Forrest.
Okay, so, do we have a motion in a second?
So move.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All right, Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Ellie's eye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Okay, so Cindy, help me out. I think we are down to the articles that we have not made recommendations on.
I think
yet.
it's 14, is it?
14, 15, and 16.
Right, that's the sewer articles, and then it's the zoning articles, so
Yep, and then
pick your poison.
Yep, Articles 33 through 38, we have not made recommendations for yet. So that's what we got left. Okay, and it's 8:50, so here we go. Okay.
I have a question before we
Yes.
even get into any discussion. So it's Article 14, right? How at town meeting do you get through this article knowing full well that it's going to get stuck for hours because so many people are going to have so many questions, so many besides calling the question, and I understand that, but wouldn't you maybe get through? How do they determine what number the article becomes instead of like putting it?
Yeah, so that's the select board's choice of how it's the select board's warrant. So the select board made the determination on what order they put things in. Generally, the financial ones go in the front. So that's their selection. So that's their determination.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're right. It's and not to dwell on that, but it's going to be the moderator that's going to need to do what he does.
Michelle, I think the simple answer is a massive pot of coffee and a big bottle of vodka. I don't.
I agree more with that, Mr. Lees.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that Steve Forrest will do a very good job in managing the discussion because he will absolutely make sure that it stays on point, very specific to what the article is for. So 14 is for, borrowing, blah, blah. He's going to control it with, I'm sure he's looked at this very closely and will control it very, very
Right.
well.
I get it. This just leads into my thing where I don't think there's been enough education about it. So I think there's just a lot of people that deserve answers to the questions that they're going to ask. And it's going to be, it's almost like you needed like a separate meeting just for that.
Right.
Yeah, and this, and not to dwell on this, but you're absolutely right. There's, if someone goes to town meeting and knows nothing about any article, it's not the place to really educate someone.
It's absolutely, I couldn't agree
But
more.
everyone deserves to be
But everyone
educated,
deserves
'cause-
it. Absolutely. That's
and,
exactly my point. Because you get hung up there and the town meeting is to vote and move on and get
Right.
the budget set, but it's
Right.
not right. Exactly.
Right.
So
Right.
I still
Well-
don't know if what I'm voting on, and I've been listening for weeks. So
Yeah,
Yeah, it's tough.
yeah.
Bear
So,
in mind-
But we're gonna vote right now.
bear
yeah,
in
let's do
mind,
it.
ladies,
So Hugh, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, there'll be a preview next week
Yeah.
because the town is voting in advance, which I think is insane, but that's another matter, to approve it before town meeting. And Michelle's comments are right on the money, I would say. My guess is that people will not be in favor, not because of the merits, because they're confused. It's a pig in the poke.
correct.
It's handicapping. That's not a matter of opposition. But we'll find
So,
out this
yeah,
time,
so
next week or so, how
we wanna
people
t-
reacted to it.
let's talk about Article 14. So, Article 14 is to raise and appropriate 35 million for the water and sewer. So let's talk about, that's the article we've got in front of us right now.
Okay, since
Um,
I've been voting, I'll give you my pitch. I think it's a bridge too far in terms of the town's reception to it. I think it is in probably a good thing for Route 6 for the town as a whole to do it. So I'm not here to handicap or bet on what the town scope will do. I would recommend in favor of it because I think on the merits it is useful.
Thank you, Hugh. Go ahead, Al.
Well, Hugh, with all due respect, I have a different opinion. I've equivocated this for the last few weeks right now. In the last 8 weeks, we as a committee and as a town have heard 2 to 3 different options, and it seems as though everything shifts. The end of January, we were talking about a 3-phase project. Next thing you know, within an hour and a half at a meeting, we're at $35 million that they talk about a project. But the reality is that's $42 million because of interest over a 20-year period of time. I made a few notes, and this is only a down payment on a multi-million-dollar project, which went from just a trunk line down Route 6, which I still don't quite understand why this is our burden as a town and not a state burden as a state highway. But then it creeps into neighborhoods and pieces of property all the way down to 177 over a 20-year period of time. I mean, let's face it, you and I are going to be dead before they build this whole thing out. But the reality is that's the setup. Then it got thrown in at the last minute by one of the selectmen about the Gifford Road loop and the PFAS, forever chemicals, which is not going to solve the problem. I mean, the reality is PFAS is everything from clothes to bottled water to everything else. But let's throw that on the, in the ceiling. And it all comes to us at the 11th hour. It just comes us to at the end. Serped has guesstimated that when the final build out happens, the town will potentially generate $400,000 to $500,000 in tax revenue. That's less than 1% of our entire budget. And yeah, 500,000 is 500,000. But having said that, nobody ever talks about the cost of this, both the fiscal cost, the social cost. What is it going to cost when we need a new fire station on Brick Road, which we actually do need now, in my opinion, but that's another story. The build out, the infrastructure, the schools that are, as the superintendent has said, almost at capacity right now. And we're talking about a multi-housing mixed-use development. Then you have the social cost. 1 acre with water and sewer can hold up to 15 housing units. No restriction on who it is, what it is, and there probably shouldn't be. And then you throw in, the mix of just the social fabric. I mean, do we want Route 6 to, and this is not a finance committee question, this is just me tossing it out. Do we really want as a town to have Route 6 look like Route 9 in Framingham.
Mhm.
So,
Better
you know,
than the used car lots.
well, you know, I guess, but at least they don't talk back. It's like living next to a cemetery. You know what I mean? They don't talk back. So I'm just saying that there are so many questions that the townspeople have, that I have. How can we vote for this? And last but not least, and then I promise I will be quiet. Everybody talks about trunk line down Route 6, trunk line down Route 6. Nothing in this article mentions a trunk line down Route 6. My Uncle Carl would be appalled at the way that this article is written. This is a blank check, open thing to do the greater Route 6 area in whatever way other boards want to not manipulate. That isn't fair. Move the money around to serve or not serve other areas. It is ill-conceived. We had a good plan, I think, 3 months ago with a phase 1, 2, and 3 project. It all got blown sky high, in my opinion, when it expanded at the town meeting at the Macomber School. In an hour and a half, it went from a phased, solid project to boom, all over the place. And I cannot and will not support this article.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate your comments. Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am well aware it probably doesn't look like I've been on skates that recently, but let me tell you, at one point in time, I played hockey in high school, and there's something that stuck with me, and probably stuck with, if anybody who's played any kind of sport, they've heard this before. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. You never stay the same. And I think that this project right here is an example of how the town of Westport can get better. And the flip side of that is there are certain things, whether it's situations with water contamination, whether it's situations with stifling economic development, if nothing is done, it's going to get worse. The couple of things that I'd like to point out specifically. First of all, Al, I completely agree with you. The way this article is written is unfortunate. The unfortunate part of that is that it is written as it's legally required to be written. It's not. It cannot. The lawyer's recommendations came back that it has to be written in this certain way to comply with state law, and it can't say the trunk line. The other thing that I wanted to mention is talking about why did this project suddenly expand as quickly as it did from a single phase to the whole build out at once. And the answer to that is actually a very simple answer. There are funds that are available right now for the entire build out that would not be available, or likely would not be available, for a phased approach. The amount in this article is for $35 million. There is no one that I know of on the Infrastructure Oversight Committee that is expecting the town to pay or borrow that entire $35 million. And in fact, there has already been at least $7 million, or excuse me, there has already been at least $1 million appropriated from a congressional spending earmark from Congressman Keating's office. I myself was part of a 3-person delegation that went down and had meetings with Senator Markey's office. There is likely, we were informed to shoot for about $7 million as far as that goes on the for next year's appropriations. There are several other grants that are possible to come down the line. The other thing that's worth noting here is that there are a large amount of EPA clean water grants that the town could apply for to improve water access to traditionally underserved communities in the North End that can't happen unless this trunk line goes in. So it's a question of, are the problems that are present, are they going to go away? They're not. They're absolutely going to get worse down the line. And with this unique opportunity where there is funding that is available right now that's not going to be available next year, it's not going to be available between between the ARPA money and the COVID money that has been used to engineer, to pay for the engineering, between Senator Roderick's being able to bring some funds in to pay for engineering and the design and whatnot here. I understand it's a tall ask, and it took it. I was not initially in favor of this. As a matter of fact, when it became clear that this is kind of a do or die, like this is the moment in which to push this project forward so quickly, for the exact reason of getting all the funding available that's not going to be available down the road. That's what pushed me over the edge. I will say that when we get to the planning department articles, some of your concerns, Al specifically, I share some of those concerns, and I think when there's a different discussion to be had once we get down to those articles. But in the end, the townspeople are going to have their say at the ballot box, no matter what. But that being said, it is. I know that it's a lot all at once. It seems like it's a lot all at once, but in reality, this has been worked on for years and years and years and years. And this is the moment right now to take advantage of funds that are available in order to get to get this trunk line in. I think the revenue estimates are a little. I would actually say they're a little under. And the other thing that's worth noting is, there's no requirement in here that for people that they would automatically have to tie in. There's no there's no forcing, even when it comes to the betterments. The betterment policy that's being discussed is very generous in terms of time involved for such things to be paid off. I do think there's additional things that can be added to talk about when it comes to what interest rates would be involved in the liens with the betterments. But the bottom line here is, this is an opportunity that's not going to exist, and if the town does not take advantage of this opportunity now, the costs down the road are going to continue to blow up, and it might never get done, and we might be in a situation where the state does not pass us over when it comes to the Title V septic regulations, like they did this time. That whole thing is not going away. This, not only would this be an economic development situation, not only would it help solve clean water issues and be able to bring in additional grant monies to deal with that, but it will also have a tremendous effect on pollution in the Westport River, more so than any, more so than what the regulations the state tried to impose on the Title V, the nitrogen systems, whatever have the effect. So I am certainly going to vote in favor of this, and I'm hoping that can at least, we'll hear what the townspeople have to say from the ballot box and go from there. But in the financial interest of this town, there's no question that this should be recommended.
All right, thanks, Chris. So Gary, you've got your hand up next, and then I'd like to go next. I've had my hand up, so I wanted to get my hand in the rotation. So, but go ahead, Gary, you're next.
Yeah, so, I drove down Route 6, I think it was yesterday, and I saw these signs, we want clean water in people's yards. Mostly not in people's yards, but like in businesses. And, to me, it's comical because we have clean water in town. That's a misnomer. And, Al's completely right. This is the foot in the door approach, because if you think it's not going to creep its way down Gifford Road and creep its way down, all these side streets down to the waterfronts, it's coming. And a $35 million project will be a mega $1 million project before you know it. And it's very disheartening to have this start off in the most vulnerable part of town. This is the most vulnerable part of town. I mean, what are the home prices in this part of town? It's just, to me, it doesn't make sense. This is a big project. And if people are closing their eyes to the fact that it's not coming to your house, whether you live on Drift Road or whether you live on Gifford Road, it's coming to you. This is just the onset. And like I said, I'm voting no on this. And that doesn't even talk about the financing piece of this. Well, maybe some people will tie in. Maybe we can stretch out the betterments, but we still got the debt to pay. That doesn't go away. And we still have a schedule to make and payments to make. So, if go to some of the neighborhood meetings, you'll see how much they're in favor these people are. There's millions of questions that have not been answered. And, it's just a pig in a poke. That's what this is.
All right. Thanks, Gary. I don't need convincing of the importance of water and sewer. I recognize that. I think a number of members, if all of them on this committee, recognize the importance of water and sewer. So I don't think anybody needs to be convinced. My challenges with what's happened here is that we're not looking at this fiscally, or we're not planning it. The Finance Committee had joint meetings with the Select Board in October and 2 in January. We didn't even discuss this project. So it wasn't even in the queue. The Select Board presented a draft of the 5-year capital plan. And in that draft of the capital plan, which we received on January 28th for our January 30th meeting, that discussed that there may be an $8 million debt exclusion for the phase of the project. Maybe. We didn't even discuss it because it wasn't even ready to be discussed. 2 weeks later, it turned into a $35 million debt exclusion to be placed on the town warrant and going to the ballot before out of nowhere. So the betterment policy is still in process. It isn't even firm. Every direction that I look at, I have more and more questions because this is a $35 million project. This is the second most significant project the town has ever incurred. And we're looking at this like it's nothing. This is significant dollars that requires us to think and plan. We went from an potential 8 million to an estimate that it's going to be 31 million, but we'll do 35 as a buffer, to a week later to going, oh, the costs are now 34 and now we don't have a buffer. And so we've gone in lightning speed for $35 million and nobody's sitting down to think about it. The residents on Route 6 in Westport, their heads are spinning. They don't even know what's going on. My head is spinning. I watch the select board meetings. I watch the infrastructure meetings. Every single meeting is contradictory to the next. Every piece of information changes at every meeting. And that's a natural thing as you're building and planning on a project. We're just not ready to go. It's just not ready. So when I am not in support of this article, it's not because I don't believe in water and sewer or the importance of it. I don't believe in it is ready right now. I think it's a pause. I think we need to sit as committees. We need to look at the whole project, not just this trunk line. What is the whole project going to cost? And how long is it going to take? Is it 10, 15 years? What is the magnitude of this project? Our residents deserve to know that it's not just 35 million. And I say just, and I don't mean just. It's not just 35 million. It's going to be more because you're going to go into neighborhoods. Well, what neighborhoods are we going to go into? One select board member talks about all sorts of neighborhoods And well, what are they? We haven't even heard from the Board of Health in terms of what neighborhoods should go into. And we're talking about well contamination. There's nothing from the Board of Health that's speaking on this. We're just not ready. So
It's all over the place.
For me, I support the concept of water and sewer. I support this, but I don't support it now. We need a pause, and we need to get back as a committee to work with the select board and the infrastructure committee to iron out the further questions. And that doesn't even talk about the zoning articles. That's just this article. So I am not in support of this right now.
Here, here.
And I will
So moved.
Thank you. So I will turn the floor over to the next person, which I think is Michelle Orlando.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to go on and on because everything that everybody said is what I agree with. I'm in support of water and the sewer and all of that. But I think what I said a couple of weeks ago, I think there are a lot of people that have been working hard on this, and I applaud that. They're very familiar with it, but the rest of us are not very familiar with it because it came up so quickly, as Karen just said. And I think that if you listen to people talking in town, if you look at social media, they're just the residents that will be impacted by this, or that we think would be. I don't think they're not going to tie into it. And I think, saying, well, there's this money that's available right now. I think it's irresponsible to say, well, we should just do it because that money is available now, because we just don't know what's coming down afterwards. And there have been other things that have been passed at previous town meetings where there's been a lot of promises made. This is what's going to happen, and we're going to get this, and we're going to get, and they haven't come to fruition. And I think people are disheartened by that. So I'm not in favor either. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Michelle. Cindy, go ahead.
So I support what Christopher was saying. I mean, I think that, we are looking at this through a microscope, and I get it. And that's exactly where, what we should be doing. But I think given some of the resources that we have in town, there are going to be a lot of questions. And I guarantee you, if we put this off another year, we're going to be sitting in exactly the same seats that we are now, with exactly the same questions that we have now, because things would have changed. And well, now it's going to be this, or now it's going to, and things will evolve over time. They're not going to go out and borrow $35 million the day after town meeting. So this is going to be a phased in project, and they want the ability to be able to present the whole project. Maybe it will escalate along the way, but I will tell you that if you're looking to receive grant money or handouts from the feds or from the states, you have to show them that you want to do this project, that this project is something that is needed in the town and wanted by the town. A bunch of no votes and saying, no, we don't want it. They're not going to come and hand you a check for something that you don't want to do. If you want federal and state money to come knocking on your door, falling in your lap, you have to show your ability to also want to contribute and get this thing off the ground. I believe that there are some checks and balances within the system. Can I put my fingers on them? No. But I don't believe that this is going to be some crazy $35 million debt borrowing that's going to get, no pun intended, flushed down the toilet. I mean, I think that it will move in a responsible manner, but the time is now. I think I made the comment once before. The only thing I've ever seen come down in cost are color television sets. Everything else goes up in price. You can buy a TV set today for far less than you could any other time. So, but everything else goes up in price. And this $35 million next year is going to be, reverse the numbers, $53 million. So I want to get this thing going. If it means an amendment, even on town floor, to trim it down to 10 or 15, whatever it turns out to be, but we've got to get this project going. I support Christopher's comments that he said on how we, there's so many needs here. So I'm going to support this.
Thank you, Cindy. Gary, do you still have your hand up?
No, Sorry.
Oh, all right, that's okay. Hugh, go ahead.
Well, I can't disagree with most of the things that have been said. One thing I will say is that people keep talking about low interest financing, 7 million and so forth. That's great. You still have to pay the 7 million. It doesn't reduce the cost. It just keeps from adding on to it. All the things that are being said, I think, are very legitimate. As far as the Camel's Nose expanding, further expansions would be new projects which would require their own financing and authorization over time. We are under the gun from the state, which requires us to do things which, whether or not they make any sense or in negative, the town's perspective, couldn't care less to the state. They have their agenda and they will impose it upon it. They have the power to do it. Having said that, I think the points by Cindy and Christopher are legitimate, and I will hold my nose and vote in favor of it.
I love all the sewer puns. Hold my nose. Was that intended?
Well, not really, just accidental.
Oh, let's see. Zach, did we hear from you? Did we hear from Duncan?
No, you haven't. I'm just concerned at the magnitude of this thing and the fact, Karen, to your point, that it's come upon us. I am sure it's, a good idea and all of that. But, when I look at the town and, everything we've talked about tonight, and we're going to just go out and fund $35 million, I got real problems with that.
Thank you, Duncan. Zach? 1 second, Gary. I just want to hear if Zach's got. We haven't heard from Zach.
Yeah, I don't really have a point that hasn't been brought up or really discussed on this. I don't want to really belabor too many points. So I think where I stand has already been mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything else. Okay, Gary, go ahead. You've got your hand up, right?
Yeah, you go to any other community that's ever just put a trunk line in or just started this infrastructure. Town of Marion, City of Fall River at one point, they started off with small projects and then they became mega $1 million projects. So the point, this is going to turn into a water sewer treatment plant at some point. And if we think that's only going to cost us 35 million, you can times that by 10. And what's the benefit of that? Clean water? I'm for clean water, but I'm also for a school system that can educate its kids with the proper number of staff members, a police department, a fire department that's fully staffed. So, what are our priorities? Is that ever discussed? Is clean water a priority? Is public safety a priority? Education a priority? I don't know. I don't think we're, and the question I asked Jim last week was, are we under the gun right now to have this done tomorrow? And the answer was no.
That is correct. That is what he said. Hugh, do you have your hand back up?
Yes, I do. I just want to say, to me, the saving grace in this is, remember, this does not affect the operating budget. If the townspeople have to vote to do it as excluded debt, therefore it has no effect in terms of the cost of this project on the operating budget. It's a separate tax to pay for this project that may or may not be painful for individual people, but at least it's separate from the operating expenses for police, fire, schools, and so forth.
Well, I did ask that question, and that might not be the case, Hugh. So the enterprise fund would need to be funded at some point. So there would, but no one can clarify how much it would cost.
I think that's bookkeeping of things moving back and forth. Some money may have to be advanced in anticipation of selling debt, which would then reimburse where it's advanced from. That's possibly true, but the way it has been presented to us, remember, and the warrant article is subject to a vote for excluded debt.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this article in and of itself wouldn't, but the water sewer project would.
Yeah. If it were not the case, the excluded debt is debt on arrival.
Mm-hmm.
And just keep in mind that this is being paid by user rates. So if in fact we give people leniency or don't have them tie in at all, under Mass General Law, if the enterprise fund goes belly up, the general fund is then responsible for taking any of the amounts that are in the red. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I have a magnitude of questions and that just are not answered in terms of even just how the calculation of the betterments are working. And, you know, of this 35 million, the plan is to do 29 million as excluded debt, 6 million is the betterment loan. But, you know, the question was asked on the trunk line right now, how many connections would that be? And I heard 150. So, and they're saying 10,000 a betterment. So you would need 600 connections to have 6 million. So there's just a lot of questions that just are not answered. And I'm not sure they've been, I have questions. So
Imagine being a resident en route in that area. I mean, think about it. It's just crazy. I mean,
yeah. So, anyway, so I think we've all made our, Al, go ahead, and then I think we can take it to a vote at this point.
Yeah, no, I pardon me. I think we've all made the points as you said, Karen. I just, there's just too many unanswered questions with too many dollars, you know, on the table with residents. I mean, what about the poor people that are put in nitro systems across from the Macomber School, for example? I mean, we can all go on and on with anecdotal issues, but it just doesn't pass the smell test for me. So let's go to a vote so that we can go to bed before midnight and
exactly
and go from there.
All right, so I will entertain a motion for Article 14.
So I would move that we recommend approval of Article 14.
I'll second.
All right, no, any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call. Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary?
Gary, no.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al?
Al Lee is nay.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Orlando, no.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, nay.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, nay.
Karen Rouse, nay. Okay. Article 15 is related. All right, Article
Karen,
15 is.
Can you give us the total no's?
Oh yeah, sure thing. It was 3 yeses and 6 no's.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Article 15 is to authorize authorize a betterment policy.
Well, it's along the same lines, right? So.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Cindy, even though I voted no on it, I would, if it passed, I would want an authorization of a betterment policy.
Right. Right. You're right.
So, right.
Okay.
So even though I'm not in favor of it, I would want a betterment policy to be established.
Mm-hmm. So
Have we seen the betterment policy? Do we even know what it looks like?
It's not been approved yet. They don't have one.
Okay. I would.
I guess you can make no recommendation since we
But
have
this is-
insufficient information.
Right, but this is the article is to vote to authorize the select board to create a policy.
Right. Christopher has his hand up.
Go ahead, Christopher.
So just to clarify here, we have no authority to alter the articles as they're written now. Any motions would have to come from the floor at town meeting. Is that correct?
Nobody
No.
over the article. The motion is what can come in. The article is what it is.
Well, it hasn't been posted yet.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, true. Yeah, directly therefore.
Right,
But the
Karen? I mean,
motion is what action.
don't you think, Karen, that if the select board approved it, there could be a change in the wording since the warrant has not been posted?
I don't know for sure. I think the wording changes they're looking for, or if there's typos or issues.
Okay.
I mean, we can certainly, Christopher, if you had a suggestion, we can certainly ask them to change, because it's gone through legal counsel, but we always have the ability in our motion to recommend a change. So we could say, we vote on this article except for to change this to that. Right. So that's kind of the motion. So we can, if there was something in the article that we supported, but wanted to make a change, I think we could do something like that. Right, Hugh? Did I say that right?
I think that's basically right.
Yeah.
The warrant article sets the limits. You can't go beyond the article, but you go within the article. And as Steve Forbes is very fond of saying, it asks the question and the motion is the answer. The motion is within the scope of the question which the warrant article sets. And the motions haven't been done yet. I mean, they haven't been, we don't know what they say.
Christopher, what did you have in mind?
So very specifically, I would say, speaking of the interest rates, to change that to establish an interest rate of no greater than 5%, because I do think that there's some room for improvement on that particular aspect of it that would still be within the statute.
I don't think we want to get involved in the internal financial organization of that. I mean, they want to make the thing balance, whatever interest rates are at the time. You may not remember, but I remember once when treasuries were at 18%. I don't expect that in the near future, but the rates should be market rates when the time comes. Not something imposed.
Karen, I just say we take a vote on the article as is, but I would also say that I'm not in favor of the project in its entirety, so I wouldn't be in favor of a proposal of any kind of document that would support it.
Yeah.
You're seeing that the entire project is not. I'm not in favor of the entire project. I would never support something that would only address a piece of it.
Right. I get it. And I'm struggling with it too, because I don't support the previous article, but I'm confused if I
would hope that if the project does come to fruition, right, and it's planned out in a proper way, that
right,
these documents that we're talking about now do come into play and are accurate.
Right.
But they need approval. They need approval through town meeting in Article 15 to apply it. So that's the issue, is that if by some stretch Article 14 does get approved, now they need the structure by way they can make the assessments.
Right. And again, these are just our recommendations.
Right. Regardless of how you feel about the project, if it passes, Article 15 sets up the ability for them to make the betterment assessments.
Yeah. I'm kind of feeling your language, Gary, to just no on all of it. So not supporting any of it, but yeah, it's a confusing one for me. Does anyone, Al, go ahead, and then Zach.
I'm going to yield to Zach first, because he had his hand up before and
right,
I've spoken too much.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that if we, on the previous article, as a committee, we voted no. If as a committee we vote yes on this, I think it's a little bit contradictory, and it would take a little bit of our weight off our initial vote. With that being said, I mean, could there be a caveat that we say, or attached to our recommendation that basically explains that we're saying no because of that reason, and that if 14 were to pass, we think 15 is a good idea? Is there any way that we can make that known?
I don't think so, but it's, I think I'm going to stick with my no's on all the articles, because that makes sense.
Let's vote.
All right.
All right. I just say one quick thing about the appropriation. That things that have been floating around the town, and of course we all know that rumors are rumors and facts are facts, and everything is fungible, including money. That one of the things that the infrastructure committee is hoping for is that the Westport betterment figure is 40% less than, I think it's Falmouth that they are using as an example. Why they come up with 40% less is beyond me. And then secondarily, we're now looking at 20%, 80%, but oh, maybe it'll be 10%, 90%. We don't really know, blah, 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 blah. Everything is so loosey-goosey about this that how can we as a finance committee look the townspeople square in the eye and say, we've got this nailed, we know the figures, you may not, you may like it, you may not like it, but we have the numbers. Nobody's got the damn numbers. So that's what I want. That's all.
Nope, appreciate it. All right, let's go. We get to it. Oh, Hugh, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, one more comment. I'm just saying, reminding us, we don't make the decision on this stuff, any of it. What we do is we recommend to the town meeting, which can ignore it. And the motion was set forth dealing with the betterment structure, so forth and so on. So we say we're again everything and so forth. Motion can be made, will be made to approve the betterment if the first one passes. We can explain it. It's not the end of the world if we recommend one way and the town goes the other way.
Great, thank you.
I make
All
a
right,
motion that we approve Article 15. Approve recommendation for Article 15.
Article
Second.
15. All right, we've got a motion and a second. We're going to go Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, no.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lees, nay.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Lando, nay.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, nay.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, nay.
Karen Rouse, nay. All right, Article 16, that one is to establish the sewer enterprise fund.
Same thing. Did we just take the vote?
Same thing, let's do a vote.
I'll make a motion that we approve Article 16.
And I'll second it.
Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, no.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lees, nay.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Lando, nay.
Zach
Zach LeBrew, nay.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, nay.
Karen Rouse, nay. Zach, I have you listed as Zachary, so I always want to call you Zachary, but then I know you go by Zach. I keep messing myself up.
It doesn't matter.
Only his mother gets to call him Zachary.
My brother's name is Josh and my name is Zach and my grandparents call me Jack. So
Oh.
I'll take
All right,
anything.
so we are, it's 9:36. We are doing,
Oh, boy.
we're doing pretty awesome. We're on the home stretch, I think. Okay, so now we've got Article 33.
Oh, boy.
Here. So we got the planning board articles. Okay, so 33 was the short-term rental.
Make a motion that we approve Article 33.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does that have a financial
I don't
impact?
think it
Oh.
does.
Right.
Actually, it does not.
No,
Right,
my question.
right. So let's just take a
Christopher
second.
has-
I absolutely
Christopher
disagree. It does, it does have a financial impact because there will be, fees assessed, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, no, I absolutely would argue it does have a financial impact on the town.
In the concept, and I'm going to jump in here, Christopher. Yes, technically you're absolutely right. Just like a meals tax or a hotel tax. But having said that, is it really significant to a $53 million or $2 million budget for us to weigh in on? I'm asking the question. I'm not pushing it.
So the other thing I think that needs to be considered is the possibility of litigation that could arise out of this as it's currently written, and I think that would have a fiscal. So that I think that could also have a fiscal impact on the town for sure.
So Chris,
So.
could you, so it's interesting because everything really has a financial impact when you look at it, right? Because everything does. So maybe you could, expand on what you're referring to, that if you take some opposition to this article that there as written may be an issue. Maybe you can share some information that the rest of the committee doesn't know about.
Well, I will say first off that it is certainly a better than a lot of the drafts that ended up being circling around. I do see some possible issues with the 7-day period. I know that I know there are a couple of other towns who have had some issues around that exact provision. So I mean, it's getting late. I understand we want to move on as quickly as possible, but if there was a motion to not make a recommendation, I would probably vote against that. Let's just put it that way.
I will make such a motion because I think that the point that the issue is, to me, the financial impact on the town budget, town spending, and so forth. And someone, I forget who it was now, said, but as far as the town is concerned, the impact of this is inconsequential. So putting everything else aside, whether you like it or not, I would move not to make no recommendation on it.
Is this for the Airbnbs?
Sort of.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
Short-term rentals, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a revenue generator. Why wouldn't we want to vote yes?
But what is the significance of the revenue? rate?
Right. I mean, we do collect a lot in meals tax and probably hotel motel.
This has nothing to do with that. This
Right,
is
but
minuscule from the town standpoint. Anyway, my motion.
Second.
And the motion is that to make no recommendation?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And we have a motion and a second on the floor?
No, I think Gary seconded, maybe
Yeah,
I'm wrong.
okay.
Yeah, I second it. Well, that's significant then.
Okay, any further discussion? No. All right, so let's do a roll call. Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary?
Gary, yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, nay.
Al?
Al Lee's aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. All right, Article 34. We are so on the home stretch. Oh, this is the big one. This is the Moostad, the Science and Technology Overlay District, the rezoning of that. Okay, so I'm going to weigh in on my opinion on this really quick, since I don't see a hand up. I am not in favor of this. I'm not quite understanding why the zoning has to come into this article at this point, and why are we taking Route 6 and flipping it on its head upside down in every direction.
Yep.
But what I do question, so this area has approximately 400 acres and approximately 134 are wetlands, maybe more, but that's what they have. So let's just say 200 acres of the 400 are wetlands. This article is looking to do high density zoning. And so 15 dwelling units per acre for this zoning. And when we talk about housing, that we need more housing for the train coming in, we may need 300 houses, 300 units, 400 units. When you take 300 divided by 15 units per acre, you need about 25 acres to satisfy that. Let's double it, 50 acres. So you don't need a 400 acre property to rezone it as high zoning. So I question why the planning board chose to do this. I question why, if we needed to do rezoning for housing needs, why maybe we didn't do a quarter of this property and do something different. I think this is, I'm just not in favor of it. That's all I have to say. Hugh, go ahead.
You said a lot of things I was going to say. I'll just add to it. We found out that there was nothing mandatory about doing it this year. And you almost made the point I was going to make about the need. The 15 units per acre is a state mandated amount based upon the categorization of the town in terms of various possibilities, in terms of distance from the train station. We don't know what the maximum is. And I think there's no reason to act on setting up this intent zoning area or to deal with a mandate that we don't know yet what the figures are.
Right.
So I'm with Karen. I'm against it.
Thank you, Hugh. Cindy, go ahead.
So my issue that I brought up with the planning board, in addition to everything you said, I also am not in favor of this article, was that there needed to be far more restrictions even placed on this. I'm very concerned. It's my understanding that perhaps this property is being put up for sale now, and so there may be assumptions and permits or whatever granted through the planning board based on this particular zoning article being passed without additional restrictions regarding impact studies or other needs that the town may have, given this large parcel of land and the ability to develop it as much as it could be in the future. I'm not worried about a 1,500 unit apartment building. We don't see any of that anywhere up and down in the area. So I'm not concerned about high numbers, but I'm concerned about pretty big numbers. And then there need to be impact studies for traffic, for education, for environmental, for wildlife, certain open space requirements, for playground use, if they're going to be, multi-bedroom units. There are all kinds of things that should be added to this that are not included. And I would be very, very concerned that a property owner would come in with a bare bones zoning article like this and grandfather themselves in before all of the little gadgets are added onto this article. I think it is premature. I think it was kind of forced in there quickly. Right now, it's a landlocked parcel of land. I get that. But given the size of it and given the access to Route 6 potentially, it would be well worth, any property owner to make sure that they get some access from either Route 6, Sanford Road, or even from Briggs Road from behind. So it's that big of a parcel that you could
Where
actually.
is it, Cindy?
It's over, if you think about a triangle, there's a map there. You think about a triangle kind of be from Route 6 up Sanford Road, Briggs Road. So if you look at that, it's land all back there. So it is landlocked, but it's 400 acres. As Karen said, there's about 125, 135 acres of wetlands, but it still can't be highly developed, and we will be required to at least designate a parcel of land for high density housing, affordable housing as well, given the train access to Westport. Maybe that's there, maybe it's not, but I'm really concerned about this property being grandfathered in without some bells and whistles attached to it. This really needs to be tightened up. I understand what they're trying to do, but it's not enough. The town deserves a lot better in getting a lot more back from this developer or a developer. I don't know who it would be or who it could be. I don't know who's selling the land, but the town could get a lot more back from them, given how much they could benefit from this development. So I think there's a lot more things that could be added to this to benefit the town. So I'm not in favor of this particular article.
I'll make a motion. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I think Al's got his hand up, but one more, and I think we might be ready.
Yeah, just two quick points. One is that I'm in support of what Cindy said. Number two, there was an article on Shorelines Digital today about the businesses in the North End, or there were 3 or 4 that were, in support of the water and sewer, including 2 developers, quote unquote, that said that they could not sell their property because they did not have water and sewer. So if they're developers, how could they sell the property? So I'll just toss that out. And the other thing too is that this whole 400-acre parcel of property, if Article 14 and or 15 don't pass, where's the water and sewer for them to develop? I mean, they can't do it on their own. I mean, I suppose they could, but realistically, it's not going to happen. They're looking for the water and sewer. So is this ultimately what is driving? And I'll give you my conspiracy theorist site here. What's really driving this trunk project? Is it developers and the Coalition for Buzzards Bay, or is it individuals who live up there that just want to live a really nice life and don't want to be overburdened with expenses? So just tossing that one out.
Thank you. I think we're ready for a motion.
So
Okay,
do
I'll
you,
make not to
so do we
recommend.
make- yeah, so do we make a motion to approve and then if you vote, then you just vote no if you do? Is it always a motion to approve and then it gets shot down? Or can you make a motion to not recommend?
You can make a motion not to recommend.
All right,
To
so
Not
I-
recommend, yes.
Okay,
Either way, I suppose, but that's the
Right.
more direct approach.
I mean,
And I move that we do not recommend this article.
second.
okay. So the motion is to not recommend. Okay. See, you're
Correct.
confusing us at 9:49 at night.
right,
Okay. All right. So, Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher, you're on mute.
Hello.
Might have to come back. This is 34, right?
34, yes.
Yep.
I'll go to,
Just
I'll
so I
go
have my
to-
number right.
I'll go to Al,
Ellie is aye.
Cindy.
Aye. Cindy Brown,
Michelle?
aye.
Thank you.
Michelle Lando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye, and we'll go back to Christopher if he's,
There he is, Christopher.
Yeah, so sorry, I had to step away for a second. This is
That's
now
okay.
just to confirm,
That's
Madam
okay.
Chair, this is a vote to not recommend. Is that correct?
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we are on the home stretch. Okay.
Two more.
Three more.
You
Oh,
said
yeah.
4, but go, yeah.
But what's 2 versus 3? All right. Article 35 is the congregate living. I'm not certain that has a financial implication. If someone thinks it does, let us know. But
I don't think so. I'm speaking
I don't
only
think so.
myself, right?
right.
I would make a motion that we make no recommendation.
Second,
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion this time at night. So we will go right to a roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Ellie's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Lando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. All right, Article 36 is the unrestricted zoning district.
This is Gateway, right?
No,
No, I don't think
Article 37 is
Oh,
gateway.
it's Gateway. Oh,
I think this is just generally putting what was unrestricted into a zoning category.
Right,
And so
I
again,
agree.
no recommendation.
No
I would
recommendation.
suggest, because not financial.
yeah.
I guess I make that a motion. Motion not
Second.
recommended. And to
Second.
reassure everybody in real estate, there are plenty of approval not required plans out there. So there's no harm in a motion to not recommend.
Second.
Wait, is it a motion to not recommend or make no
Make
recommendation?
no
no
recommendation. That's
Right.
right.
Okay, great, thank you.
second. Yep.
Just me, all right, second, all right, Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Ellie's aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Lando, I.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. So we've got our last one, and Cindy and Jess behind the scenes. I hope you guys did a good job because my notes are terrible on these votes, but we'll figure it out.
Between the three of us, we'll get the right ones.
Or hopefully we won't have to listen to this whole thing again. Okay, so Hugh, go ahead. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just gonna talk, this is the next one, the one, the
Yep.
Gateway District.
The Gateway. Yep. So
I
this
have-
is
I
this
have
has got
two
financial
reasons-
implications.
I have two reasons to be against it. Number one, it's premature. Once again, same as before. That is, this was rushed in there, and we know that. That's the planning board said because they thought they were mandated by the state to do things this year based on the anticipated completion of the station railway station in Fall River this year. Didn't complete it, so this is next year's issue. Secondly, there's been a little, I won't say skullduggery, but in this article, there are more intense multifamily units suggested, etc. The idea seemed to be that that was part of the mandate of the 15 units per acre from the MBTA. Turns out these properties would not qualify for that, which is why we went back to the 400-acre parcel we've been talking about. So I don't see any reason to have this done as something mandated when it isn't. And any reason it has to be done now because the mandate, whatever it may be, is next year. And all the things we've been saying all night, time to find out all the details, the questions people are asking, there is time. Don't do it now, do it next year. Motion to recommend against.
I'm with you, Hugh. Do we have a second on the motion, and then we can open it up
Second.
to
Second.
anybody else have anything to add to that? No. Okay. Hugh,
Well, not surprisingly, you weren't nice.
What is the motion exactly?
to not recommend.
Okay.
No, right. Okay. Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al, I with just a quick comment that I always appreciate Hugh's wise counsel. So, yeah, no, it's, yes, I.
thank you. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach
Zach,
LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. And we actually do have one more article. I thought we were done, but it's Article 38, which is, it's the minimum front yard width, which I, again, don't think it has a financial implication.
I recommend no recommendation.
Second.
I'll make a motion. Yeah, make a motion, no
Let's
recommendation.
do. Any comments or discussions? Okay, I'll roll call. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Gary,
Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's I.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. I think we did it.
Yeah.
Whoa, we did it.
And it's not even 10 o'clock.
Right.
We
Close
did it.
enough.
9:57.
What else can we talk about?
Well, we need a designated person to move to adjourn. You've lost our designated person.
Oh, right.
moved.
And I already had my carrot cake, so I can't even say I'm gonna go get carrot cake. So, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Yeah,
All those
let's
in
do, we gotta do a roll call.
Oh, boy.
Hugh,
Aye.
we're used to it. Gary,
Yeah, Gary, yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
thank you. Al,
Al, I.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle
Michelle?
Orlando, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you all so much.
Good
This
job.
was massive. Great job, everyone. Thank you.